Turn it back off. We'll call this meeting in order. Today is the 18th of October, and let the record show that all commissioners are present. I do apologize, we're a little bit behind today. We had a pretty good conversation upstairs in our closed session. Let's see here. Do we have our advisory committee meeting schedules? The next BIAC, the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee meeting, is Thursday, November 10th at 5 p.m. That's the GA Conference Center at the airport. The next Technical Airport Advisory Committee is November 10th. That's 9:30 at the GA Conference Room at the airport. And then our next Marina Advisory Committee meeting is November 8th, 5:30, and right here. So it looks like we've got some public comment, folks. So it looks like we got a long list. We do, when the list is long like this, if we can keep it to 3 minutes or less, that would be fantastic. So that way we can all get our thoughts in sort of a timely manner. So let's start with Jean Shannon, and followed by Grace, and then Greg. So Jean, up at the mic up here, if you would, please. Yes, sir.
I'd like to speak to you.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Like that?
Yep, you're
Okay,
fine. You weren't
thanks.
on.
I'd like to speak to you today just briefly about quiet zone possibilities for Fairhaven, the three crossings that are in the Fairhaven Portlands. A number of us are here today, and I want to just start by giving you a brief history of the quiet zone in the United States. In the early 1990s, Chicago in particular, Milwaukee, and a lot of cities in Florida started making ordinances and statutes that forbid the blowing of horns in certain residential communities. They fined the railroads, and it was quite a mess. And of course, the railroads, by and large, complied. And without the horns, you can imagine the accident rates went up. There was some severe accidents where people were killed. So in 1995, Congress made a law, that famous phrase, and it's called the Swift Rail Act. And what it did is it changed the landscape forever. It took 10 years to implement the Swift Rail Act because the cities that already had the quiet zones didn't want to have to comply with the new rules. The new rules involved sometimes expensive supplemental safety measures to make the crossings more durable so people couldn't defeat the intent of the arms. So the rule did two things. It provided the specific ways you can add these supplemental safety measures, and it increased the volume of the horns. It standardized it, it nationalized it, it took away the cities and states' rights to control the railroad horns. So that went away. And what I'm asking you here today to do is, I know your 2017 budget is pretty well closed. I'm imploring you, if you would, for 2018 to take a serious look at seeing if you can't figure out a way to put the supplementary safety measures into those three crossings in the Fairhaven Portlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Grace Munson and Greg Hoffenbacher will be after.
Thank you for having this opportunity to speak and taking the time to hear us. I live on Garden Terrace, and I hear the horns every night. I've lived here for 5 years, and I have not adjusted to the sound. I wear earplugs every night to be able to sleep, and I'm just asking that as you consider the financial costs and all of this, that we look at White Rock and all of the beautiful quiet zones that they have there for the trains, and try to do something like that here, and all the multiple crossings that we hear all night and day.
Thank you, Grace.
I live up on the border, and it's not very quiet for the quiet zone they have there. We hear the same thing as you. We hear the horns all night. I live in Blaine. It's quite noisy.
Great, but when I'm there at a restaurant, and I'm sitting there, and I see the train go by, and I can still talk and hear it. I don't hear the train.
No, I was just letting you know that there's just more than Fairhaven, too. It's pretty noisy all up and down.
Hi, my name is Greg Hoffenbacher, and I represent the South Hill neighborhood on the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the South Hill neighborhood. I really want to thank, first of all, the commissioners for having the Fairhaven Quiet Zone in the budget. I realize it's not funded at this point for 2017, but it's really encouraging for us to have it in the budget because this has been our #1 neighborhood priority for the last several years, mainly due to community health and safety concerns. We strongly support upgrading the Fairhaven Railroad crossings to modern safety standards. In addition to the safety, the high decibel train horn noise is a serious public health problem and wakes up many area residents and visitors, negatively impacting Billingham's livability and economy. The Federal Railway Administration estimates that vehicles and trains collide every 67 minutes, and we just saw one on Central Avenue, a few days ago. Cars going around gates, similar to the gates in Billingham that haven't been upgraded, is a major cause of railroad fatalities nationwide. Such an accident at a Billingham crossing involving an oil train could have devastating consequences and many fatalities, especially, Marine Park in the summer or Boulevard Park in the summer. In addition to the safety impacts, the health impacts, according to many sleep and brain studies, interrupted sleep can seriously impact human health. One study found that reduced sleep time is a greater mortality risk than smoking, high blood pressure, and heart disease. Interrupted sleep impacts attention, memory, mood, quantitative skills, logical reasoning, and even motor dexterity. Another study showed that sleep-deprived students scored lower on tests and found the effect comparable to children who are lacking basic nutrition. Other safety impacts: sleep loss is a big public safety hazard every day on the road. Drowsiness can slow reaction time as much as drunk driving. Sleep deprivation was a major factor in some of the biggest disasters in history. 1979 nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island, massive Exxon Valdez oil spill, 1986 nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl, among others. Also, some obvious economic impacts, property values, property taxes, and so forth. We've also got a list of comments that I've collected from neighbors and visitors, and I was just going to, it's on the back of this sheet, so I'll just pass that around. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Looks like Robert Lane and Don Intihar, hope I got that right, and Jane Bright.
Hello. My name is Robert Lane, and I'm hoping I'm not going to say the same thing that probably everybody else is going to say. Anyway, it's been at least 10 years that the city has known about the train noise and safety problems, and unfortunately has chosen to do nothing. And now I guess it's probably now in the lap of the port. The problem is not going away, and in fact, I expect, and you expect, the train traffic will get worse over the years. And the cost of fixing the problem isn't going to get cheaper either. It's really a serious safety issue. The crossings are not secure. Sooner or later, somebody really is going to get hurt one of these crossings, and that will be a preventable injury. And I think they'll probably come to the port for compensation. This is not a problem for the rich people on South Hill, as some people think. You can hear those trains all over the city. I actually have a very large collection of earplugs that I use that maybe I could pass around. I think the port has a choice. It can do what it wants, but I think it would prefer not having a low-class, noisy, unsafe train town.
Thank you, sir. Don?
Thank you for taking your time to hear me. I live on Boulevard Park, just up there with the condos. And like everyone else, I hear the trains all the time. Now, I wrote to the Federal Railroad Administration a 5-page letter about a year and a half ago, and I outlined how they could have a zero horn regulation by improving the safety of the rail crossings. With the arm comes down, there's 2 or 3 rather dim bulbs. The red lights on the masthead going back and forth, colorblind people can't see them. What I suggested to them was that they take the mast and they have colored lights going up and down. That would be red, blue, orange, and white, so that everybody in the color spectrum could see them, and across the arm that comes down, so that the visibility, just like an emergency vehicle, just like a police car or an emergency fire EMS person, those lights catch attention. There's no question about it. But when I look at the crossing arms and the crossing mastheads, they're lousy. They're dull and they're ineffective. So I was hoping that maybe we could change the thinking of the railway as far as the crossings are concerned, because they're so, I think, ineffective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Jane Bright, then Mary DeBrow, and Doug Smith.
Hi, and thank you very much for hearing public comment, and especially thank you for putting this on the agenda to get done. And don't envy you having to make those priorities, but I would ask that as you go through those priorities, you think about your criteria, because as you're hearing, safety is a primary issue. And what some people don't understand or have the information about is that the so-called quiet zone is more than a quiet zone. It's a safety zone. And the FRA looked at, for example, Harris Street, and they have this risk index that they do on these crossings. And with the horns now, Harris Street is rated at almost 25,000. Don't ask me how they do this, by the way. But with the safety upgrades that qualify for quiet zone standards, it drops to 5,680. Alaska Access drops from 13,700 to 3,151. And they did not do the private crossing. But the point is that we had an accident this weekend. We had a fatality in 2008 at Boulevard Crossing. 2001, we had a car that was struck at Pine and Wharf Street, and the person who was hit sued the city of Bellingham, and that was settled for $400,000, which is about what it would take to upgrade a crossing. And that doesn't include whatever the legal fees for the city were. So when you think about the safety issues, keep in mind that it takes a mile for a train to stop. If you are hit by a train, you're 20 times more likely to die than if you're hit by a car. Hitting a car hit by a train is comparable to a car hitting a can of soda. The force is just incredible, and the whole point of the horns is to keep people safe, which clearly we all want to do. But I would just ask you to think about this with your priorities about safety. From a health standpoint, you've heard about this. The physiology of this is that the horns are designed to trigger our flight or fight response. It's involuntary. As you heard, some people hear it for years and years, and they never adjust. This causes the flooding of stress hormones that go through your body, and the result of that is cumulative over time. Never mind the sleep deprivation. I'm not even talking about that. The studies have shown very clearly that children who are exposed to this kind of noise have lower cognitive ability and performance in schools. The health effects include cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure, heart rhythms problems, depression, exacerbated mental health illnesses. It's a very long list. So as well as safety, there are health issues. So again, going back to your priorities, I know economic focus is huge, and we all appreciate that. I would just, number one, thank you for even putting this on the agenda, and encourage you to get this done as soon as possible. Thank you.
I have a quick question. When you sound very knowledgeable and done a lot of study on this, is there a reason why people go around crossings that are down? Is there one particular reason?
That I don't know. I could speculate, but I don't know. I've not seen any studies of that. I think people, some of us think we're immortal. I mean, we're in a hurry and we don't wait. I also think people don't understand that it takes a train a mile to stop as opposed to a car. Excuse me. And the force of a train is so much, it's just exponentially higher than getting hit by a car.
Thank you.
So if anybody knows, I can see if anybody knows, but Gene, go for it.
Can you go to the mic, please?
Well, from the FRA studies, typically when people think they're going to swing around those gates, is they totally misunderstand the relative speed that a train is at compared to what the car is doing. The size of it makes it look like it's going slow, and they routinely miss the fact that it's going faster than it is. The other one that kills them real regularly is if you've got a double track and the train goes by one way and they think, okay, this gate is still down, but there's no train, so they go around it and whack, there's a train coming the other way. So those are the two big sources of death around slaloming around the gates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Mary DeBrow.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Commissioners and Mr. Fix, for hearing our comments today. My name is Mary Durbrow, and some of you may know me through my work with the Community Boating Center over the years, but today I assure you I'm speaking as an individual and a member of the small boat community. I'm a kayaker, I'm a sailor, and a rower. And I would like to talk today a little bit about the 2016 Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements. We've become aware of something just recently that on page 49 it says there are some improvements to the industrial areas on the Fairhaven waterfront, but there are no improvements that serve the small boat community. And I'm referring back to a document that was done by Port Consultants in 2007. Reed Middleton met with the small boat community after the Skunk Works process had gone on for quite a while, and they summarized the needs of the small boat community in a document. It's right here. So it was in February of 2007. And the needs of the small boat community were so clearly articulated during that time. And I would like to address specifically the safety issues of small boat people launching from the beach with motorized vessels launching from the ramp. It seems over the 10 years that boats are just getting bigger and bigger. Trailers are getting longer and longer. More and more people are kayaking, more children are on the beach trying to kayak. And there have been incidents of people getting hit by trailers. One child was hit by a trailer at one point. And I think it's really necessary that we separate the hand launch area from the ramp. And there is an opportunity, I think, to soften the beach north of the ramp. And I'm hoping that we can deal with that as a safety issue. The other safety issue that I'd like to see addressed is the no-wake zone is just totally ignored and has been kind of a hazard to some of the beginning boaters in the area. So at a minimum, what I ask is that some of the improvements that have been discussed by even the port's consultants for the last 10 years get added into the 2016 scheme. Specifically, I'd like to see the safety issues, a softened beach for hand launching that's separate from the ramp, the no-wake zone, and I do see that somebody has just recently handwritten in that they'd like to control the traffic pattern there, which might help a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. My apologies for the last name. Commissioner Briscoe has a quick question for you.
Question for you.
Mary.
Quick question. Is a float usable for the kayak?
It's really not, and it's not usable for a couple of reasons. Rowers need a dock that has about a 6-inch freeboard because their oars extend onto the dock to stabilize the boat when they're getting in and out of it. And many kayakers prefer to enter and leave a kayak at a dock instead of a beach, and it's way, way, way too high for that, and it's way, way, way too unstable because the breakwater is insufficient to really protect that dock from the wave action. So the answer is no.
I guess my question
Is if you had the proper float there that you're speaking to, is that something that would suffice rather than a softened beach?
I can't speak for the rest of the rowing community, but I think that it would be very hard to add a low free, because the thing would have to be 9 feet wide, an oar is 9 feet. I don't know how you could add a low freeboard wharf there, but certainly any attempt would be great, and I'm sure the rowing community would be glad to work on that with you.
Maybe if you have time and you could put something together, you could email it to the commission?
Sure.
So some ideas?
Be happy to.
Okay,
Yes, thank
that
you.
would help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Doug Smith, followed by Dale McKinnon, and then Robert Worley.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Did you say Doug Smith?
Doug Smith, yes, sir.
Okay, fine, thank you. My comments have to do with the rumor that the port may be considering financing a crane. And I've had about 70 years of experience with various cranes. And I would recommend that the port not involve itself. Cranes are very handy. They're nice to have when you're going to do heavy lifting and things, but I can assure you that they are extremely dangerous for lifting. And if the port has anything to do with the ownership of crane, but has no control over the operation and the maintenance of that crane, I think you're exposing the port to unnecessary risk. So if the rumor that you folks the commission is considering financing something like that, I would very strongly recommend against any involvement. Even the fact that you just underwrite the loan, the financing, is not in the port's interest. Please avoid the unnecessary risk of involving yourself in purchasing, maintaining, or trying to assist any of your tenants in purchasing that equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Dale McKinnon?
Thank you, Commissioners. I am a rower, and I can talk specifically to what Mary DuBrow just mentioned. But it's more than just the rowers that are out there. We are few and far between. Your kayakers are a very huge population on the bay. In fact, there are more kayakers per day out on the bay than there are motorized craft. We just don't see them because they're just 17 feet, 18 feet long. They hand launch and they go out and they play in the bay and then they come out back in for an hour or two. The problem is that when people try to go out of Harris Bay, we have weather, we have constraints of the railroad, diminishes safety, and we have, we do need a breakwater, but that's an issue that may not be addressed for many years. I do have a specific question on the comprehensive plan, and my question is this. When you put all of the other comprehensive plans together, will you be editing those plans in order to create the overarching plan?
No, we don't have we're different than the cities and the counties, but Sylvia, can you address that real quick?
Let me tell you one thing, please. We do have a public hearing on the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvement next. This isn't that hearing. This is an open comment period. But the answer is no, we wouldn't further edit them. That would be a consolidated comp scheme, and it's intended to be really broad. But we'll talk about that next when we get to that.
Thank you very much. That was my question. Thank you very much.
Thanks for asking. Robert Worley, I believe. Anybody named Robert? No Roberts. Starts with an R. Is there a Rob? Lives at Forest Lane. All right, I guess Robert left. So J. Keith Adams, I think is what it says. Jay? Did Jay leave as well? All right, well, both points about quiet zones, so they may have had their comments read by somebody already. So anybody else that hasn't signed up that would like to say any words to the commission, please.
I didn't sign up, but thank you.
Up to the mic, if you would, please. And please state your name, since it's not written here.
My name's Don Vogel, and I live in Fairhaven, so I, quotation marks, enjoy a lot of the train horn noises. I used to live in Salem, Oregon. It's the capital. And I don't know how long it's been, they've got no train whistles in Salem. I guess they've done everything necessary, but it's also the capital. So I just wanted to comment, it was nice being around Salem without those loud whistles, and they sure blow them a lot of times, 10 times and quite a distance away. So that's my comment, that Salem has done whatever it takes to not have the whistles blow. Hopefully we can achieve that here as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? All right, we're going to close our public comment period and move on to our consent agenda. Before we do that, two points I want to make. One is, a lot of folks came today to talk about quiet zones, and I know it's our 4 o'clock hour, but we also have a 5:30 public comment period. So if in the future you'd like to address the commission without impacting your workday as much, please feel free to use the 5:30 comment period as well. But thanks everybody that did come today for that. And then also on the agenda, we have a public hearing on our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, and it was noticed that I'm sorry, can you tell me what did we notice? There was a change on our schedule. Diane, can you remind me of what that error was?
I could address that.
What was the error when we published
The public
it?
notice said that the hearing would be at 5:30
There you go.
PM, and then on the agenda, it's at 4 o'clock. So what we were thinking is at the end of this meeting at 5, we would recess the hearing, reopen it at 5:30, so that if anybody arrived at 5:30, they could still speak.
Yeah, so we are going to move on our agenda, it shows the public meeting just after the consent agenda. We're going to move that to the end of our action items, so a little bit closer to the 5 o'clock break. And then also after the budget status updates from Tamara. So if you're reading along with the agenda, we're just going to move that a little bit further, closer to the 5 o'clock hour. So now we will start with our consent agenda. And Diane?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through C.
All right, anything troubling you on that one, Mr. Robbins? And Commissioner Briscoe? All right, no struggles. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. And now that I've shuffled my papers and I'm confused, we are going to move to the equipment lease agreements. And Brady.
A motion to approve an equipment lease agreement between the Port of Bellingham and the landings at Colony Wharf to acquire a mobile crane that serves the port, Colony Wharf, and other port tenants and customers at the C Street Terminal. And B, a motion authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with a single sole source service supplier for the purchase authorized under the equipment lease.
All right, Brady.
Thank you. My name is Brady Scott. I'm a real estate representative here at the port. I'd also like to acknowledge Mark Lake and Amber Olslager with the Colony Wharf are here today. By way of background, we have a slide here showing the C Street Terminal. The C Street Terminal is a multimodal facility used for cargo and lay berth and haul and launch of vessels. It supports 2 primary tenants, the landings at Colony Wharf and the BMI, and other customers use the facility there. Recent projects at the C Street Terminal have included, with the Whatcom Waterway cleanup, redevelopment of bulkheads and floats. We are scheduled to, in November 4th, coming up this year, to have the barge ramp arrive and set up for use, as well as currently ongoing are access improvements along the C Street right away. The benefits to the port on a lease of a crane, purchase and lease of the crane, are multifold. It would include the ability to use the crane to position the barge loading ramp for its use. The alternative to building, the alternative to using a crane for the heavy lift area, the alternative to building, the alternative to using a crane to install the barge ramp would be to build a lifting system at the cost of $1.3 million. Another benefit of the crane is it increases the capacity for loading and offloading of cargo and launching of vessels at the site. This is important given the 10-foot setback at the heavy lift area and the increased distance at the boat haul out area due to the construction of the wall associated with the Whatcom Waterway project. It would also help to move heavy items for port tenants in and around the terminal. A large crate on the site will increase commerce by the overall, increasing the overall usability of the site and preventing users from the large cost of mobilizing cranes if it wasn't on site. The details of the lease are the lease agreement would provide for the Colony Wharf and the port to work cooperatively to identify a crane for purchase at a cost of up to $700,000. Landing at Colony Wharf would agree to be the exclusive operator of the equipment. Colony Wharf would be responsible for the maintenance and insurance of the equipment and would provide an operator to use the crane by port customers at an approved rate, as well as provide the port a discounted rate for port use. The rent proposed is a 3.5% rate of return on the purchase price of the crane, plus 1% of the gross revenue on the crane operations, and 0.25% on revenue for the boat haul out area and use of that. The term of the lease would be a 20-year term. Since the agenda was published, there was 2 relatively minor changes to the document I wanted to bring to the attention of the commissioners. In section 3.11, there was a one-word change that related to the rent to clarify that section. As well, in section 4.11, we added a sentence that says that the obligation of Colony Wharf to serve the needs of the C Street customers is a material benefit to the port and forms a part of the overall economics of the transaction. The fiscal impacts of the deal, the overall cost of the crane would be up to $700,000. Point out again that this would save the alternative cost of building a lift system at $1.3 million. So the net savings there would be $600,000. The revenue over the 20-year term of the lease on the 3.5% would be $490,000. The gross revenue is estimated between $35,000 and $55,000 for a total revenue over the term of the lease of between $525,000 and $545,000. At the end of the lease, the port would still own the crane. There'd still be some expected value in that crane, and we'd be able to continue to lease that crane beyond the 20-year term. As mentioned, part of the motion here is to approve the executive director to purchase using a sole source purchase process. Due to the type of purchase of a crane, there's precise specifications needed. There's limited market on cranes for this price. And of course, the purchase price is limited by the lease. And due to those factors, it's believed that there'd be likely only one crane identified that would be able to be purchased. And therefore, approval is requested for the executive director to have sole source purchase authority. And with that, the port staff recommends approval of the lease, and I'm available for any questions.
Commissioner Briscoe? Go ahead. Commissioner Robbins?
You say November 4th is when the barge ramp will be delivered?
That's correct.
And what was the cost of that barge ramp?
It's about $300,000.
Okay, and then is it in 2 pieces?
It's designed to be like set up in multiple pieces, kind of like an erector set. So it could be put together in various stages and lifted using a crane and put in place each time a barge comes to the site for the crane to be used.
So that's how it will be used?
that is how it's envisioned to be used. It would be stored on the uplands, and each time a barge comes in place, it would be lifted by.
What's the weight of the heaviest piece?
That is a good question. I'm going to try to remember that detail. I don't have that on the top of my head, the weight of the ramp.
Mark, do you have any idea?
Well, I was told a couple.
Need the mic, please?
I was told a couple different weights. It started out around 40,000, but I think the total weight of the ramp is going to be somewhere around 60,000. But I'm not sure. I've asked Brady that same question.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have that detail in front of me. It is designed in such a way that it could be lifted in pieces based on small cranes, but it would take some time to construct it, because you lift it in one piece and then you have to install additional pieces and bolt them together. And that's a lower weight. But then a larger crane would be able to install it all. It wouldn't have to be deconstructed and constructed each time.
So it weighs 60,000 pounds, so if you had a crane that could lift the whole thing, it's not going to be put in pieces. It'll be put in as one.
That's a definite advantage, because it would be in one piece, ready to be installed.
And the length that reaches out over the water, that needs to be a 150-ton crane?
Yeah, you can see here.
150,000?
Whoops. Sorry about that. Circle the crane area here. That's the picture of the ramp area. So a barge would pull up and it would be able to be set there. The calculations are that in its pieces, it could be installed using smaller cranes that are currently present on site, but to do it all in one piece, it would require a bigger crane, which the crane envisioned under this lease would be able to do that.
Could it be installed with the existing crane that Colony Wharf has if it's done in pieces?
It was designed for that purpose, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Brady, I don't really have a lot of questions on this, but one of the concerns that I've long had sitting here is that when the Port of Bellingham took over this property, the overriding concern that all of the tenants on these properties had was that we don't put anybody out of business with this new ownership, and lease rates went up. It's been a challenge to work through the cleanup and all of that. So the cleanup is done. Now we have a new heavy lift area, but there was a facility that was privately owned before, which was an existing barge ramp that had been there for 50 or 60 years, that allowed wheeled traffic to load and unload barges. And the original cleanup plan didn't include any provision for wheeled traffic. So there was most of the traditional work that was happening at the area utilized wheeled vehicles for loading and unloading barges. So without the ability to drive on and off, a lot of the traffic that would have normally happened here would just simply disappear. So I'm very much in favor of the port putting back into place the facility that we took out. Originally, the plan was to build that permanent structure at, I think you said it was $1.3 million for that. And of course, there's permitting and the other costs associated with this. Would be a further delay in getting some sort of a wheeled vehicle access on and off of barges. This plan gets us back in play in November when the ramp arrives. So that's much quicker than spending the next year or so or longer trying to get provision for the permanent structure that was originally envisioned. The savings here is huge, and one of the advantages that I really like about this plan is, one, we don't have anything else in the water, so from an environmental standpoint, that's a good thing for the Whatcom Waterway. But the other part is it's much quicker, and it's more. The facility ends up being more useful when you can be able to move that ramp in different locations. And back to my original point about not putting people out of work. Having a crane here is a massive advantage, especially with the BMI. You see in the yellow, we're moving BMI back and appreciate them being willing to do that. But it opens up a lot of new terminal area where we can get larger and more significant objects on and off of these barges. So from the standpoint of access, where Whatcom County can improve our connections to Alaska, this is a very helpful facility. So notwithstanding former Port Commissioner Doug Smith here and his comments about the ownership risks, which I'd like to ask Frank about in a moment, but outside of the risk of actually owning and operating a crane, which is something that ports do, I really like where we're going with this and providing an even better amount of access to barge traffic. So Frank, when it comes to ownership, the port's going to own this piece of equipment, and then it's operated by an outside operator. So how do we mitigate risk from accidents and that sort of thing?
The equipment lease provides that the landings at Colony will comply with all applicable regulations in terms of operation. In that regard, they have to comply with the applicable code of federal regulations, and they have to maintain the crane. And they're responsible for all those things. In addition, they put in place a $5 million liability insurance policy where the port's named as also insured. But former Commissioner Smith is correct. If there's an accident, I think in today's day and age, you can,
as I said, the equipment lease provides that they have to have a trained operator in full compliance with all federal regulations. They have to do so, operate the crane in a safe manner. They have to maintain it. They buy a $5 million liability insurance policy for both themselves and the port. I will tell the former Commissioner Smith's correct. If somebody gets hurt and decides to sue, of course, they know how to spell Port of Bellingham, and so I think you can anticipate we'll be involved in the litigation. But that's what the insurance policy is for. So the best that we can do, as anybody who leases equipment does, we've not only required they do things correctly, but we've required that insurance be put in place to protect that risk.
And Brady, I may have missed this when I was reading it. There's cranes or lifting equipment periodically has to be inspected by, I'm assuming, probably a state inspector. Is that a port? Will the port be paying for that since it's port equipment, or will that be done by the operator?
Colony Wharf is required to do that per the
part of the maintenance
terms of the lease.
Okay.
To have it certified, I believe, annually.
Okay.
In that same vein, it says that they are responsible for insurance as well. But from what you said, Counselor, does that mean we have to also carry additional insurance on this crane?
Well, there's two kinds of insurance that when we talk about insurance. The first kind of insurance we talk about, Commissioner, is casualty insurance. Casualty insurance is insurance that covers an object for damage to the object. So homeowners insurance, fire insurance is a form of casualty insurance. They are required to carry insurance on the crane for casualty. So if it's broken, we can make an insurance claim. The other kind of insurance is liability insurance. That's if a third party makes a claim as a result of use of the crane. They also are required to carry liability insurance in the amount of $5 million, and we're named on that policy. Having said that, the port also carries significant liability insurance, which would sit above that insurance.
I understand that, but we would not have to buy additional insurance. It would be covered on the policy that we have now.
We would add it to our equipment schedule as a piece of equipment that we insure.
So the premium could go up if we did that.
Not likely. If there's a $5 million policy below ours, it probably doesn't affect our policy premium.
Thank you.
On that topic, Rob, we had a conversation earlier this year about increasing the port's coverage. Is that still in play for next year or the next time we renew?
Yeah, we're talking to our insurance consultant or broker on that and working through what that coverage amount needs to be. I mean, it's nothing's that black and white that we can say, yeah, our premium went up and yeah, our premium didn't. But I don't expect that with $5 million below the port's policy that it would have much of an effect, if any.
In context, Commissioners, all the ports in the state are looking at their upper limits of liability. Periodically, they do that and say, boy, do we have enough insurance? What's the marketplace pricing? What's it look like right now? Seattle and Tacoma have raised their limits. Bellingham, I think Anacortes, some other ports down on the river are looking at kind of generally raising, not related to this transaction, just generally limits of insurance.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Brady, the upper limit's 700,000, what we're going to spend, but that may not be what we spend for the crane. Am I correct?
Correct. It's up to $700,000.
Correct. So
including all costs.
we could save additional money above what we're talking about right now. So, and I agree with Commissioner McCauley and Commissioner Robinson. There's stuff they spoke to. So that being said, the $600,000 plus we're going to save for the taxpayers of this county by purchasing a crane seems to me the correct thing to do. As Commissioner McCauley spoke to, we took a facility apart, a barge facility, our C Street terminal. We took it apart, and due to environmental things during the replacement and so on and so forth, we've obtained a setback that we did not have before. Therefore, the crane that is there may be able to lift the ramp, but reaching out with the ramp with that setback puts everything right at its full limits. So there's problems with the setback. Those areas, one of the reasons the larger crane is needed. This larger crane, I truly believe, will bring us more commerce at that facility down there, which can mean more jobs for the people in Whatcom County. I think it's multiple-faced benefits to having that crane. As far as the longevity of that crane, there's been the question of 20 years or so on and so forth. With 300 to 500 hours of use per year by that crane, I believe that it will far exceed the 20-year lease and capabilities to be kept on site and using. I'm well aware of if you take care of equipment, it lasts a lot longer than projected life. The other thing is in the marine industry, you get a phone call late in the evening, middle of the night, wee hours of the morning. We're going to have a barge there. We're going to have something there we need to load. You don't call up a crane service like Sickle Seal or somebody in the middle of the night and say, we need a crane here in 5 hours to offload a barge or put something on. That happens quite often in that industry. Having a crane on site and the operator not too far away is also a plus for our terminal down there, that we can do the job when it needs to be done. We don't have to wait. That's a big plus for our terminal. We spent a lot of money on that terminal. I think this is maybe one of the last steps to make it a good terminal and well received by the marine industry to use. So with that, those are the reasons that I will be voting in favor of this lease. And as far as lawsuits from having a piece of equipment on the property, the Port of Bellingham is being sued by people stepping off of curbs, walking into wires, twisting ankles. It's just the nature of the world we live in now. So if we're going to make a decision based on whether we're going to be sued or not because we have a big piece of equipment on our property to use, we wouldn't be making very good decisions, in my opinion.
Some I think I should point out, so the original plan we had for replacing the barge ramp was a $1.3 million permanent structure. So we'll spend $700 on, up to $700 on a crane, which obviously has much more uses than just loading barges. But the ramp cost was $300, I believe?
Yeah, so $300,000 for the ramp itself, 1.3 for the lifting system, if we were to go that route.
So we're not really offsetting $600,000 if we're just speaking specifically about the ramp, because we're 700 plus 300 is $1 million.
But the other option was $1.6 million, not $1.3 million, because you still had the 300. You had the
Still needed the-
yeah,
the-
the
oh,
$1.3 million
okay.
just covered the lifting system for the
not the
$300,000
ramp.
ramp, unless I've stated that
Well,
incorrect.
that's correct.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. All right, so then 600. That's even better than I was thinking. I thought we're hiding, not hiding, but not being fully aware of the extra 300,000 there. But anything further?
That was my question as well, was that 300, I thought it was only a 300 savings. How many barges, when that ramp was working, I think I've been a commissioner for 2 years while that ramp was working, how many barges did we unload during that period of time approximately?
That's a good question. The port doesn't keep records on the number of barges. We keep records on the days of moorage. And anecdotally, my understanding in talking with tenants down there was on the order of 20 to 25 a year for Colony Wharf. We do have records for BMI, which shows about 8 to 10 a year. Those were in the years 2013 and 2014. We also understand that anecdotally, the crane use by Colony Wharf down there was on the order of 80 to 100 hours a year historically, but expecting with a crane this size to go to 300 to 500 hours a year.
Maybe if someone from the staff or even Colony Wharf could answer this. I remember two barges that I've seen down there, Bryce's barge and the big gravel barge. Other than that, in 2013 when it was working, or 2014, how many barges were there total?
I think the last barges we did before you closed the terminal down, we did 20 barges of gravel for Cowden Sound and Gravel. We did 20 barges in a row. And before that...
Was that before or after the one big barge that was stuck there? We had the one big barge that came in full of gravel that had...
Yeah, that was a Cowden barge too, and yeah.
So were these 20 after that barge?
Oh yeah, that barge you're talking about was a couple years back or something. And there's been many barges since then, but the last big barge job we did, and we're working on jobs right now, was 20 barges, 2 a week until we did 20 of them for a job out on the islands where they brought a bunch of sand to do a environmental cleanup.
Okay, thank you.
So Bobby's only been here a little while, but I've been carrying this rock for almost 5 years, I think. This is a piece of gypsum, and it comes in from South America to the terminal down here maybe once a year, twice a year. And it's run through a ball mill out here at the Lehigh plants, and they crush it down to add to local concrete. So South American rock going into our local concrete. But this is my little 1 pound reminder of how important our terminal is. So I'll share that with Bobby in case she ever wanted to play with a piece of gypsum rock. Anything further?
Yeah, I had a couple questions on the cost of and the revenue the port's going to get. This barge is going to be $700,000 maximum cost to the port, and we're going to receive a revenue of little over $2,000 a month. So that means during the 20 years, and that's the life of the crane, over that 20-year period, we won't pay for that. We won't pay for that crane. The way I figure it, if Colony Wharf were to buy the crane themselves and charge us and charge folks to use it where they own it, they would be paying over $5,000 a month if it was somewhere in the neighborhood of a 6% interest. So the difference between $5,000 and $2,000 is quite a bit. So my concern, we did for another similar tenant, we did a pier for $500,000, and his payment on that pier was $3,800 a month, where this is $700,000 at $2,000 a month. So my concern is when does this become a gift to a public fund gift? I guess the counselor, I'm concerned that a tenant might complain that we gave them too good a deal here. I don't think I would at all have a problem if over the 20 years they paid without interest. The port doesn't charge them interest in the barge, but they paid the barge off, which would be about $3,800 a month instead of $2,100 a month. Then it would be paid, or not the barge, the crane. Then it would be paid for. So I'm concerned with gifting a public fund.
One sec, Frank. So it could be said that, based on what you're saying, that 20 years is an arbitrary, why did you choose 20 years for the lease?
That
Just
was the
'cause.
term that was requested and agreed, looked at for the benefit to the C
Okay.
Street terminal.
It could have been 17 years or 29 years, any number we really want. So eventually, the crane does get paid for, but not by the public. The public doesn't have to pay for this crane. The public will eventually get all the money back from the ownership of this crane.
When will they get it back?
Whatever your math is, that times that number of years. So we had a 20-year lease, but if the crane doesn't need to be replaced in 20 years because it's been well maintained, it continues to get leased at the same rate. And eventually, the original investment gets paid back, just not as quickly as 20 years.
The other thing that we do not know is exactly what that crane's going to cost. Maybe it'll be a $450,000 crane, maybe it'll be $550,000. We don't know, so it's pretty hard to say that it's not going to be paid for in that 20 years until we know exactly what the crane costs.
So are you saying if we get a crane for $400,000, that they're going to pay the same amount? Colony Wharf will pay the same as a $700,000?
As far as I know, or is it different?
The rate's a percentage of the purchase cost, so
So it would
they would
go
be
down.
adjusted accordingly on that. I think there's a question in there, 6 additional years beyond the 20 would be approximately the amount to break even.
So you theoretically could just write this, again, it's an arbitrary number, the lease, the number of years for lease. So if we needed to match the lease length with the recovery of the initial investment length, then it would just be a 26-year lease.
That's how the math
So
works out.
Frank, Commissioner Robbins did ask a question, though, about the gifting issue.
Yeah, so the Washington State Constitution prohibits gifting of public funds. Article 8, Section 7 of the Washington State Constitution. And so our courts have looked at this issue because it's come up a number of times, most recently probably, and most famously, the Safeco Field for the Mariners was the last time it was looked at. When the court looks at this issue, it looks at two issues. It first looks at the question of what's called donative intent. And donative intent is a determination on whether the government body sought to confer a private benefit on an individual or an entity like the Landings at Colony Wharf. And the court would want to look at why it was that less than, if one assumes that and I don't know this, but if one assumes that the rental rate is less than one could go out and rent a crane on the open market for, then the court's going to want to decide if there was any donative intent. And that is a subjective view, and it deals with the purpose for the use of the public money, and whether the primary beneficiary of the public money is the public or a private party, okay? And so there are a number of cases where a private party is also benefited when the use is it benefits the public. Then there's no donative intent. So I would encourage you, I hear your discussion that there is no donative intent here. It's not the intent to benefit this particular port tenant. It's the intent to have this port tenant provide a crane with an operator at all times for this barge loading facility. They also are going to get a benefit because they're going to have a crane, presumably less than they could rent it for, to use for their own business. If there is no donative intent, the other thing the law will look at is the consideration what the court calls grossly inadequate. So the considerations, the amount of payment, is that grossly inadequate? Grossly inadequate is a very high burden. I mean, it's not just 3% as opposed to 10% or less than fair market value. Grossly inadequate speaks to, well, I can tell you a real-world example. About 25 years ago, the port rented a old, dilapidated building at the airport for $1 to the city. The city, in turn, provided it to the Humane Society for a animal shelter. The auditor came in and said, $1 is too low. That's grossly inadequate compensation. And it's donative intent. When the Humane Society got the animal shelter. And the port said, well, we didn't give the animal shelter to the Humane Society, the city did. So they went and talked to the city about that. And because it was between the port and city, there was no problem. But you could see if you leased a building for $1, that would be donative intent. So here, I think it's important that you put on the record what your purpose of this is. Presumably the purpose is not to benefit necessarily Colony Wharf. They're going to be an ancillary beneficiary of this because they get this crane. On the flip side, they're providing the operator that's trained. They're providing the insurance. They're doing the maintenance. They're having the inspection. And the crane is there to operate this terminal. I did mention the Seattle Mariners case. In the Seattle Mariners case, I don't know if people know this, but the annual rent for Safeco Field is $700,000. And Safeco Field costs, it costs the taxpayers $336 million to build. So it's approximately a 0.5% rate of return over the 20-year useful life. But there the court said, well, the Mariners are insuring it, they're maintaining it, there's some other profit-sharing provisions that go into there, and they upheld that. Now, you can't say, well, that then creates the bar at 0.5%. It just tells you kind of how the analysis of the court goes. So, long answer, Commissioner. The issue here is, does this commission have a donative intent to benefit the landings at Colony Wharf, or is there another intent that's a public purpose for spending the money? And then secondly, is the consideration grossly inadequate, which is in the neighborhood of a very, very low rate of return? So those are the two issues that go into the constitutionality of this kind of thing. There also could theoretically be an issue with lending of credit. Are we in essence acting as a conduit financer for the landings at Colony Wharf? That doesn't typically occur in a lease situation because we own the asset at the end of the 20 years. I would also remind the Commission that the landings at Colony Wharf, if their main lease terminates, this lease also terminates. So that they don't have a right to take the crane and move it anywhere. They can't move it off this property without the port's permission. It must remain here at the C Street Terminal facility unless the port otherwise provides permission for them.
So that's a key provision. Since the port has gotten into, quote, a somewhat different line of business with the purchase of these properties, we have to be able to use the properties. So whether it's the landings at Colony Wharf with the ownership and the businesses that have been there for decades or any other business, we still need some way to load and unload heavy things onto barges. So we still need a crane.
And see, Commissioners, to Commissioner Robbins' point, I'm not trying to suggest for you an answer. I'm telling you that you should make the record clear about your intent here and the purpose. And so that undoubtedly when for people understand we're reviewed every year by the state auditor, that they'll understand the reasoning behind your thinking and be able to proceed from there.
Well, I think, Frank, thank you for all the explanation. I think it's pretty clear. The benefit to the public here is that we have a terminal that now has public, anybody can come there. Not that they couldn't come there before, but because it is a public terminal now, we need to make sure that there's plenty of reasonable access to the water and from the water. So, as I just said, we need to provide that access in some way, or we risk the very real problem of spending, what do we spend on the waterway, $30+ million, and no traffic wants to come here. So it's imperative that as the owners of the property making gigantic investments in the waterway, the biggest probably in the history of that waterway, making sure that we have the access is absolutely critical. And this doesn't, because the asset's publicly owned and always will be, I don't see that it's conferring any benefits that's more valuable to an operator there than it is to the public overall, because we will own the asset and we provide that access to and from the water. So it's, to me, I was a little confused when we kept having this conversation about donative intent, because the asset still is owned by the public at the end of the day. So thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Will the Will Colony Wharf still use the crane they have down there, or this will be the only crane they need if we purchase this? Is that correct?
My understanding is they would be able to use both. We could ask Colony Wharf exactly what they plan to do on their, with their own crane, but I think the intent is for both to be there.
Why would they not sell that asset when they have a crane that would do everything?
Well, we plan on keeping our crane that we have for the beginning of this other crane till we switch over to the new crane. And there's a possibility that maybe we could use that crane to benefit us other ways on that piece of property. So we're thinking about selling it, we're thinking about keeping it, but it's a tool and it's an asset to that piece of property. And so we're not sure what we're going to do with it.
How big a crane is that one?
It's an 82-ton.
And this one we're buying is 150 ton?
We haven't established the exact crane we're buying, but it's one that's being looked at as 250.
250 ton?
250 ton.
Wow.
I'd like that, Mark, what will get, with the setback, what will the ability weight-wise be to reach out to a barge?
Well, with the 250-ton crane, it gives us a much bigger ability to set things on barges that we've never had before. Yes, it would definitely help us a lot more.
So would you say it would give you a third of the tonnage out over the water to load on the barge? So if you're 250, say, can you get 60 tons?
Oh yeah, we'll be able to put some weight out there. With this 250-ton crane, which I'd like to see the port get rid of that setback so that I can put that crane right on the wall. But it gives me a big ability to set 40-ton picks out there, 60-ton picks out there, maybe even 80-ton picks. So it would be a huge benefit. Yeah.
We've done an analysis on the lift weights and the distances, which we could provide the commission.
Yeah, I was just trying to point out the advantage of the bigger crane at the site versus a crane that can only pick that pretty much straight up and down where you're at. You said 85 tons, correct? For the crane that's currently there?
Yeah, our crane's an 82-tonner, and it couldn't pick that if we tried. That's a max pick. Right now, for us, 50,000. Well, now with the setback and stuff, we couldn't even pick 50, but we could pick, the old dock, we could pick 50,000 pounds. Well, with this new crane, if it was the 250, you could pick 80, 90,000 pounds, the same as you could do with the other crane.
Okay, and Commissioner Robbins, I apologize, I missed for some reason the cost when it goes up and down what you were speaking to, so I apologize for portraying it the other way.
Well, look, go ahead, Barry.
I don't see the donative aspect here because at the end of why we would even think we're doing that when we're trying to enhance a facility that we just spent millions of dollars in. It just doesn't make sense that we wouldn't do that. And whether it was Colony Wharf or another group, if the port had to operate the crane on its own, train a new employee and add another employee, the cost of that is pretty expensive. And just to have them on standby when the crane wants to be used. So at the end of 20 years, or if the lease was terminated before, we still own the crane and we can sell it. So either way, the port or the people of Whatcom County are going to retain their money or get their money back that we invest in this. I don't see a money loss for the people of Whatcom County. I see a big money gain here by buying the crane versus a fixed ramp because it gives us a multitude of use instead of one thing.
Commissioners, the term donative intent arises because undoubtedly, again, I don't know, but assuming that the 3.5% is less than one could go out and rent a crane in the market, while your intent might be to benefit the public, there is a ancillary benefit to the landings at Colony Wharf because they get a crane that they can lift their own boats for less than they could go out and rent a crane. And so the balance that the government or that we look at is to say, is the primary purpose the public benefit, in which case there's no donative intent, or is the primary purpose to benefit a private party, in which case there is donative intent. And what I hear you saying is the primary purpose is the public purpose. If there's an ancillary benefit, let me give you an example. In a case involving the city of Tacoma, they put new side sewer hookups to all these houses. That's something normally a homeowner would pay for. And the city of Tacoma said, the reason we're doing that is we want all these houses off the septic system so they'll use our sewer system. And the court said, it is a benefit to have a free side sewer hookup, but that's not the primary purpose of the expenditure. It was the public benefit of hooking everybody up to a sewer. That's the issue here. So I think, to the extent you let everybody know the public benefit that comes from this, and that's the purpose behind it, then the only other issue is the compensation grossly inadequate, and that's a very high bar.
Would the courts or the auditors look at other deals we've done like this as a port to use as comparison? Because that's where my hang-up is. The $500,000 at $3,800 a month compared to this $700,000 at $2,000 a month. If it were $3,000 or $3,500, I could vote yes on it easily because we're going to get it in time. We're going to get it paid for over the 20 years. But I have a tough time when we do one thing for one tenant and something so different for another. So that's where I'm concerned about what the auditors would do.
Frankly, first of all, let me say that the port, has had a long history of cooperating with the auditors. We try and do things correctly. I'm sure that they'll look at this transaction. They look at a wide variety of things. I don't know what they're going to look at. This certainly has a C Street terminal component to it that's a bit different. But at the end of the day, they'll look at all factors, Commissioner, in determining what they believe to be, in reviewing the transaction.
Well, I agree with the whole contract. I agree with everything that would do for Colony Wharf. I think that's great, but I just can't agree on that low of a rental rate. So I'll vote no, only because of the price. If it was $3,500 a month, I could easily vote yes.
This conversation has been coming up all year, and I'm struggling to draw the connection that you're making between this facility and the finger piers that were put in at the Seaview North Yard. The difference that I'm seeing here is there's one sole beneficiary to the finger piers at the Seaview North Yard, and that's the operator Seaview North. There's no public access in there at all, and the only person who can use it is the leaseholder at that yard. Whereas here, I just don't see the comparison being made. One, this is a much more open and useful area for anybody who wants to load anything onto or off of the water, whereas the yard at Seaview is not. So how are you making I don't understand how you're making the two as to be similar or that similar.
Well, I'm only doing it on the cost of money, on the $500,000 that we charged on $500,000, we charged them $3,800 over that period of time. So for $700,000 for a similar deal, it doesn't make sense that it's only $200,000.
This is where I don't connect either with a similar deal. Okay, we're talking about a fixed pier in the water. Okay, that fixed pier can't be picked up and sold 20 years down the road to somebody else unless we give them the property with it. This crane, however, can be sold, if kept in good condition, can be sold to someone else to recoup monetary value off of it, whatever that might be. Whereas that pier cannot be sold for a monetary value to another business and taken somewhere else like the crane can. So,
but the pier appreciated in value, and the crane will depreciate in value, and that.
Well, now you say that, but I will argue that that crane will not depreciate in value. With the cost of things and maintained properly, I believe that crane will hold its value, if not appreciate, if it's taken care of.
One other question I had, can this crane be used off port property? Can Colony Wharf use it off port property for other tenants?
It would have to be approved by the port for it to move from the C Street terminal and the landings lease area. So its intent is for it to be used there. It could if we approve, the port approved that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? No, anything further?
No.
All right, can you reread the motion, Diane, please?
A motion to approve an equipment lease agreement between the Port of Bellingham and the landings at Colony Wharf to acquire a mobile crane that serves the port, Colony Wharf, and other port tenants and customers at the C Street Terminal, and a motion authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with a single sole source service supplier for the purchase authorized under the equipment lease.
All right, no further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, pass 2-1 votes. And normally we'd be taking a break at 5. We're going to power on through since it's 5:17. However, we're going to have a 5-minute recess for bathroom breaks and snacks if anybody needs that. And we will be back here at 5:24. So we're going to reconvene.
It's not here and didn't turn you on yet.
Not up? I'm up. So we're going to reconvene now, and we've made a few adjustments to the agenda, so we've got some folks signing agreements with us today. We'd like to get them out of here as soon as possible. However, at 5:30, we do have our public comment period, so if anybody's here for public comment, please step up to the mic over here at the lectern. Anybody? Okay, that's pretty easy. So the changes, I'm sorry. Yes, Sipa.
Hi, everybody. Milan Slipčević, President of Commercial Fishermen Association. I'd like to say thank you that you guys decide to put a crane in a Colony Wharf, way better crane. That's going to benefit all our community, not just Colony Wharf. And myself, we have this just last month, Seafeast Festival, signature festival for city of Bellingham. And looks like end up pretty good for first time, and we try to get to the point to have a covered area at the harbor where we can work on our gear through the year, or at least for some other events, and have it for that festival that we can put 2,000-3,000 people under the roof if it's the bad weather, because this year we are lucky. At this time of the year, we can get the rain and wind or whatever. And if our port commissioners decide to, and our port staff decide to put something, that's what we ask for. And if we can help you with anything there, that's going to be nice to assist you in anything in the harbor and move our gear or whatever to get to that point. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sipa.
Thank you, Sipa. And you're referring to what's called a commercial fisherman's pavilion, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Kyle.
Thank you. This is also about Bellingham Seafeast, and I've been asked by Debbie Granger to read a short statement. She's on the East Coast right now, but given this is the first meeting after this very successful event, she asked me to read this. However, I want to be careful. Bellingham Seafeast is a separate organization, and I'm not trying to claim any credit for the Working Waterfront Coalition for Bellingham Seafeast. The best thing we did for Bellingham Seafeast was to loan our secretary to Bellingham Seafeast, and now we want her back. And this is her statement. On behalf of the planning team for Bellingham Seafeast, we express our sincere gratitude for the Port of Bellingham for their significant partnership with the inaugural Bellingham Seafeast. From start to finish, the Port of Bellingham staff were gracious, generous, and helpful. While this initial Bellingham Seafeast was successful with over 4,500 people attending and eager to learn more about our maritime and commercial fishing sector, the area we termed the Commercial Fishing Pavilion was too small for the crowds that gathered there. The 20 by 40 canopy Bellingham Seafeast rented was not adequate for those wanting to watch the oysters shuck and slurp, the fish filleting demos, the knot tying and net mending demos, the guess the fish activities, and so on. Indeed, the evaluations from the event attendees indicated that people wanted more of these authentic experiences. The proposed commercial fishing pavilion would be a permanent canopy structure that would provide a much-needed multi-use facility. Examples of the many uses include commercial fishers net mending, diverse events including Port of Bellingham rentals, direct marketing opportunities for fishers during peak seasons, etc., Bellingham Seafeast commercial fishing related activities, and more. Fundamentally, the planners of Bellingham Seafeast believe that the shelter provided by the permanent commercial fishing pavilion would be an asset to the maritime and commercial fishing sector and to our very interested public. And I understand, just hearing rumblings today, that we're talking about the location is, a new location is being considered. From I don't think SIPA addressed this, but from a commercial fisherman standpoint, you're going to have to move the gear to the pavilion anyway, so that there's a easier sell for a different location that's at Squalicum Harbor. As far as I know, there's no problem with that. So thank you, commissioners. Thanks from all of us for helping make this event a real success. We really appreciate all the support.
And I'm sure I echo the other commissioners. Thank you for all you guys put into it, and Debbie for what you put into it.
Thanks for this letter, Jim. It's from the Working Waterfront Coalition, slightly different than, but supportive of what the Sea Feast folks were talking about. Is that what this letter's?
I'm sorry. There are two handouts I gave to you, and one concerns the testimony I hope to give during the public hearing, if you will allow me to speak again.
Okay.
The first page is about what I...
Okay, so we'll have the letter regarding the commercial fishing pavilion.
You don't have that?
I do. So we'll have that entered. So these are separate issues. Okay, all right. So
Yeah, two separate.
two different issues.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anything? Oh,
I forgot to say one more important thing, that we Port of Bellingham have to kind of think about security issue. This summer and all the way through now, we have problems with the crime in a commercial area of the harbor. Our cameras is like from dinosaur area, you know. No, but nothing is updated and doesn't record anything. We can check who is getting the harbor, who is get out. We talk through the harbor and think which way we can solve that problem, if we can go with a new camera system in the port, or we think that is probably best way to get to the point, get the port security, get security that is employed by the Port of Bellingham, instead of the hiring security from the side. That way we have a chance to have steady employees, port employees, that going to know the tenants, that going to know what is belong to us, going to see and recognize the strange and, you know, people that can do the crime. And that's going to be way more effective. I know it's going to be expensive and to hire new employees. If we can relocate some employees that we have in the harbor that is not that busy on a job, then we can get to the point to have better security and not much crime in the harbor. Thank you very much.
thank you, SIPA. Anybody further during the public comment period? Okay, if you've got something to say about the harbor scheme of improvements, we also have a public meeting about that shortly. So we ran a little bit long on one of our topics, so with the okay from Commissioners Briscoe and Robbins, I'd like to adjust our agenda so that our next item would be the conversation with Pando, which is ITEC, then our public hearing on the harbor scheme of improvements, then the cold storage item, and move our quarterly report and budget status to an update, and then the waterfront district update, if it's okay with you folks.
Fine with me.
With that? All right, so let's move on to the action item regarding the sale of the buildings to ITEC.
A motion to approve a purchase and sale agreement between the Port of Bellingham and Pando Innovations, LLC, and to authorize the Port Executive Director to execute all other documents associated with the closing of the transaction.
Thank you, Diane. Hi, Commissioner. Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. I want to introduce a couple of folks in our audience today from ITEC. Dave McCarty, Chief Operating Officer, if you could kind of wave your flag so we know who you are. Carl Unterschuh. Carl Yu is who I call him, and he is the Business Development Director for ITEC. So I want to welcome them both to this meeting. I also want to tell the Commission that John Flanagan, who is the owner of Pando and the co-founder of iTech. Wanted to be at the meeting today, but has a commitment in Nevada. So he wanted me to extend his apologies to the commission for not being able to be here. So the transaction before you today is super exciting to the staff and to iTech and hopefully to our community. It is consistent with the Port's mission for economic development. With your approval, we're going to ask you to sell the 800 Cornwall building. It is in the downtown core. We're going to also ask you to sell about 2 acres of associated property to iTech at a purchase price of $1.7 million. And closing is expected to occur on or before November 30th of this year. And we're asking you to authorize our executive director to execute all necessary documents to close the transaction. iTech estimates putting about just under $2 million in improvements into the building and about $4 million in equipment. They currently employ about 95 people. They'll add about 30 to their workforce as a result of expansion in this area. So that will plug about 125 employees right in our downtown core, which I think will really help our downtown area and the surrounding businesses. You're going to hear from a couple of the staff, and we're going to make this quick. Steve Shipman's going to go over the deal points of the transaction, and I will tell you that they are consistent with the memorandum of understanding of which you approved back in April. So he's going to quickly give you the highlights of that, and Dodd Snodgrass is going to talk a little bit about the economic development piece, and then Carl Yu is going to come up here and talk to the commission about iTech's plans. So thank you, and all of the staff will be here to answer any questions.
Shirley.
Great, thank you, Shirley. Give me just a moment here to get our bling up here, if you will. Okay, as Shirley mentioned, iTech and the Port staff has been in conversations about doing a transaction on the Cornwall Avenue area we started the conversation in 2014, and again, Shirley mentioned that the memo of understanding between the parties was approved by the Commission of April 2016, and I'll move right into the deal points on this. Shirley mentioned there was a sale of the warehouse. It's 48,000 square feet. That price is at $800,000. There's a sale of 2 acres of property to support that building and surrounding uses. That was at a price of $900,820. So as Shirley mentioned, it's about $1.7 million in total. There is a right of first offer to lease or purchase the north parcel, and if you noticed in your action memo, you'll see that diagram there. It's likely that iTech will need to expand the north to use that to support their operations, parking and whatnot. It's highly unlikely that staff would ever approach this commission or future commissions regarding kind of a sale of that property. There is also a right of second offer to lease or purchase the banding yard, and this is completely subservient to any kind of a marine use which would take precedence down there. Staff has no intention of doing anything or taking anything in the commission that would alter the priority to have a marine use in that area. And then finally, the purchase and sale agreement provides a provision in the event that iTech would choose to sell the property. iTech is responsible through the PSA to alert the port that they have received a bona fide offer, and that gives the right for the port to either match that offer or not. As Shirley mentioned, this is scheduled to close on the 16th, and we are very excited about this transaction. Oh, yeah, Dodd. Sorry, Dodd.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, Commissioners. A little historical perspective. The Port, in our economic development mission, our countywide role, we were introduced to iTech back in 2012, and they might have had 10 employees. See where they've gone now. So as we follow along, stayed in contact, the growth plans were made apparent to us. We had conversations. We worked and assisted with them countywide to look at any opportunities for real estate for existing buildings, and that's where we arrived at the Port building. So it's been a great synergy. I want to emphasize clean technology as industrial sector in the state. That's a high priority. There are different areas, maritime, aerospace, and others, but this is a growing, important sector. It really puts Bellingham on the map statewide to get out of Seattle's shadow, and we can point to this this project and the growth of iTech as opportunities to bring more of this kind of industry to Bellingham and Whatcom County. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Dodd. I just call him Carl U2. Can you pronounce it properly for us, Carl?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for considering the purchase and sale agreement. Indeed, as the staff has said, we've been working on this for a number of years, and we have grown from when I started. I was number 12 employee to now we have 90 employees and growing very rapidly. The plan for this building is to put a new skin on it, put a new floor in it, potentially cover the whole roof with solar panels, really to make this a world-class solar panel manufacturing facility in our downtown core. And we're very excited about this, proud about it, and really encourage you to vote on it. I would like to say we've enjoyed immensely working with all of staff at the Port for this last couple of years. They've been very supportive and helpful. We're not real estate folks, and so they've really helped us through the whole process. So thank you all.
So, Carl, you do have to pronounce your last name for us, though.
Unterschutz.
Okay. It's going to remain Carl U forever. Shirley. Thanks, Carl.
So unless the commission has any questions for us, the staff is certainly recommending approval and ask for you to take a vote and give us your approval.
Well, I wholeheartedly support this. I think you're going to be just a wonderful partner, and great to have you on our waterfront. I think it's a great business to have down there, and I welcome you.
Yeah, I also turn that on. Yeah, glad to have you folks down there. I don't like selling property. You gentlemen are aware of that. But the first right of refusal that Shirley put in there makes me feel a little better. So I'm glad to have you there, and I will be supporting it.
So the only problem I had with this whole deal was that first right of refusal. And what I don't know how far the conversation got, but what I originally asked was that we could structure a deal the way Colson Community Land Trust does, so that appreciation of the property doesn't go crazy because of demand, but that investments could be recovered upon the sale of the property. Don't think we quite got there, but
I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it was the 11th hour negotiation to try to get you exactly what you wanted. And unfortunately, we couldn't deliver. It was a walk-away deal, right? So we got the best possible thing we could get for you and the commission.
Sure, that's great. You know, we still get the first right back. So if the public feels that this is a property that must be part of the portfolio, then it's possible, if it ever sells, it comes back. One really important side benefit to note is that this was a former Georgia Pacific property, and the Port did get this property for essentially nothing. So the sale of this does free up some cash that we can spend on other things, and spinning off things like this does two things in my mind. One, it allows us to use some financial benefit from the purchase of the Georgia Pacific property in other places around the Port, or around the county, I should say. But also, this puts it right back in the tax rolls. So this is now a privately operated structure, will be a privately operated structure, and it's probably the largest employment influx in downtown Bellingham in I don't know how many years, 100, and so we got 90 at least, plus some 30 plus growth. So that's huge, and it's. I think personally, I think it's a pretty sexy industry, and I don't disagree with Dodd at all on that point. I think it does help Bellingham. Clearly, iTech has been has been bringing a lot of attention to Whatcom County. But being able to point to a company like this and say, hey, look, we're world-class in a lot of ways, and this is one of them, it does help us get out from underneath that Seattle shadow, so, and make a little bit of more of a name for Whatcom County. So I'm super excited about this. And we did have to strong arm this guy into purchase.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff, especially for putting up with me, because I didn't want to give up the property, but they convinced me for you guys that it was a good deal. So, staff, thank you very much.
Yeah. Anything further, Commissioner Robbins? No. All right, with no further ado, all in favor say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We
Still
really
struggling,
appreciate
isn't it?
that.
Thank you, Shirley. All right, we are going to move into a public hearing. So we're going to recess our regular meeting. We're going to open a public hearing on the Port of Bellingham's 2017 Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements. And we have a little something from Sylvia.
Just a minute. That's not it.
Yeah, I know. It still says it on 16 on the web, too.
Likewise, it says draft on it.
All right, Sylvia Goodwin, Planning and Development Director. Just a short introduction before the hearing. This plan is an update of all of our 6 individual comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements to consolidate them into one document. And the purpose is to comply with the RCWs that the port needs to maintain a current comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, and all of our capital expenditures need to be consistent with that plan. It gives a good opportunity for public comment on the plan, and it'll be a good reference document for the commission, for staff, and for the public to see what lands do we own, what are our future plans, and a broad overview of what our projects are. We've had a few people concerned about what happens to the old plans, because we have old plans in Fairhaven, Blaine, and other areas, including the airport, the waterfront district, that are in a lot more detail. We will not lose those plans. Those will stay on our website. In fact, a conversation during the break, it would help if we added hyperlinks to those other plans, so that people can find them and they can go right to that link to get greater detail. We can do that. So the plan is divided into the planning areas of the port. We have a total of 1,600 acres and 1.3, almost 1.4 million square feet of properties, divided in the areas between Blaine, Sumas, and the airport and the Bellingham waterfront. Those are each individual sections of the plan. We have a Chapter 2 that describes all of our port facilities for each of the planning areas. Everyone has a map showing the buildings that the port owns, the buildings that citizens or private sector owns, and the leaseholds that we have, along with describing public access and other facilities. And there's a Chapter 3 that is capital project summaries. And these are much, much broader and higher level than what we had in our old comp schemes, where we have each individual project listed with a budget. This lists the general types of projects and big projects. And the idea is that everything that's currently proposed in our capital budget and that's summarized in our old plans is summarized in here. So they will remain easier to update, and most anything that we are planning to do will be already covered in this plan. If not, then we will amend it when we need to add new projects. A little bit on the detail. To go through the plan, you go through Chapter 2, and it shows the properties, the existing uses, and the proposed future uses, and then on each of these, you go to Chapter 3 for that area to see the proposed capital projects. So in Blaine, we generally described the fire line improvements, sawtooth docks, some bulkhead repairs, upgrades to the north and south pier, Marine Drive improvements, potential future fuel facility, demo of some unused buildings, upgrade or replace the marine rail. We have 2 fairly large cleanups in Blaine, and some parking and access improvements, along with some promenades and public improvements. Yes.
I don't have a question.
Oh, yes. On each of the plans, and I practiced this before the meeting, so dang. Huh? Okay, so I just need to go like this. Oh, and check this out. Here's the arrow, and there is a little red dot. So in the plan, there are these red asterisks, and those are areas where there is some redevelopment potential. In Blaine, we have a few areas out here and out here where, oh, I guess you can only have two, where the port has some vacant or underutilized land, and that's where we have some opportunity to do some redevelopment.
I was referring to the line, the red line that's drawn.
I'm so sorry.
How it goes out in the water through the boats?
But I did have a chance to demonstrate my computer expertise. The little lines on the map are the boundaries of property, and we believe this property, this boundary here, is a street that had not been vacated, or potentially it's a street that has been vacated, but the county assessor doesn't realize it's been vacated. That's an area that we have to do some additional research and probably take some information to the county and say, why do you still have a public street growing through our marina? That was the advantage of doing, one of the advantages of doing this is it gave us the opportunity to research a lot of little things like that that now we can fix. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not going to go through every project, but in Sumas, we have land that was purchased by the port, upgraded as an industrial facility, and has now been surplused. That land is available to sell to the tenants that occupy that land, and we have an option on some of it. The plan is not to do further improvements, but to sell that land when we can. International Airport, we went through a detailed airport master plan, and we are in the process of updating that. This section describes what's in the existing airport master plan, and when we update it, we will update this plan to reference the new plan. Little Squalicum Beach, we have a lot of land there that is for public access and along the waterfront habitat. We have Mount Baker Products in the middle, and we spent a fair bit of time on this one talking about this site here in the back that is behind Mount Baker Products. It's a piece of vacant, underutilized land, and there's a lot of constraints on that because of the shoreline regulations. It's not in the city. We don't have water. We don't have sewer. So that's described in great detail. And we got a comment from a citizen about why don't we mention this breakwater and the future opportunity to have a boat launch, or not a boat launch, but some kind of a ramp along this shoreline. I hand wrote on the copy that I have to distribute to you one more bullet that would reference that issue, and I recommend that we go ahead and add reference to that. We would not actually do improvements to this area unless we had a tenant that was going to generate some jobs and revenue to pay for that. Moving through, we have Squalicum Harbor. Quite a lot of projects in Squalicum Harbor. It's fairly fully utilized. One of the projects that we talked about today is, can we make better use of this commercial fishing storage area? That's the approximate location that has been discussed for the commercial fishing pavilion. If it isn't a commercial fishing pavilion, there's probably better use of that property if we could find an alternate location to store the fishing nets. And we've talked about the possibility of moving them over on Squalicum or over on Roeder, or finding an alternate location. And there's several other projects mentioned in this area. Again, fairly fully developed now. Bellwether, again, is fairly fully developed. The only vacant site we really have, we have this behind Red and Net, and then we have this Building D site. Other than that, Bellwether is fairly well developed, and the projects that we have relate to restriping and altering parking, doing some landscaping, and as we relocate All-American Marine and launch the boats here at the boat launch, we're going to have to clear out a route across this parking lot in order to get those boats into the water. Those projects are described very generally. Waterfront District, again, we have a 2013 sub-area plan that is in great detail. This section references that plan. That plan will remain in force. If we update that plan in the next few years, as we've talked about, this section would be modified to update, to reference the new plan once it's updated and adopted. And there's a lot of projects, and you'll notice on this one, asterisks are across the whole site because almost the whole site on the Waterfront District is, vacant and underutilized. So there's a lot of opportunity to develop that one. Fairhaven, we had some discussion tonight from both the Quiet Zone folks and the boat launch folks. We do have the 3 railroad crossings, one here at Harris that is a city crossing on a port road because the road was vacated and it accesses our port terminal. So that is an issue that the port and city need to work cooperatively on to upgrade that crossing. The crossing that was discussed here is at the boat launch, and then there's another small private crossing here at Seaview. So those are our 3 port crossings that the citizens were talking about earlier on the Quiet Zone. And again, the comp scheme just says that we would upgrade those quiet zones as one of the projects. We have a lot of projects relating to the shipyard. We have some projects relating to Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. A project, we've got some underutilized land on the end of FMIP, and we talked about demoing a few underused buildings. Next steps, public hearing tonight. If you have minor typos or edits, get those to me as well. In the copy that I distributed tonight, I found about a dozen typos and things that are fixed, additional typos and things, or major changes. I'd like some input on, do you want to add an additional bullet to address the concerns of the hand launch boat folks in Fairhaven, or the Mount Baker Products bulkhead are the only 2 issues that I've really heard. And then we will produce a final plan and bring it back to you by resolution on November 1.
All right.
And that is the end of my presentation. If you have the public hearing, and then you can close it at the end of the hearing.
Sylvia, just as a point of clarification, you have future updates here, and you give 3 different scenarios where we update this, but isn't it not true we will update this during next year's budget cycle as well?
We do not have to. Previously, what we've been doing is every single year we update our comprehensive scheme as part of the budget, because our previous comp schemes were so specific that a lot of our projects weren't consistent with, or the comp schemes weren't specific to the project. So this is written so broadly that unless we either acquire new land or come up with a new project that isn't listed in here, we don't have to update it every year. And that's the whole idea, is it will save us that time and effort of updating it every year. We would update it after the airport master plan is adopted, after the waterfront district sub-area plan, or if we come up with additional land that we acquire, or a huge new project that we propose that wasn't generally described, then we would need to update it. Otherwise, it'll be good for a few years. Other questions?
Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you.
We do have some folks signed up for public comments, and I would take that opportunity now to do that. And the first person is Mr. George Dyson, then Steve Walker, and Jim Kyle.
Thank you. George Dyson, 435 West Holly, and I'm on the board of the Working Waterfront Coalition, but I'm speaking personally, although I think what I say would be endorsed by most of our group. So I know when you have a document, you like specific comments, so I'm going to ask you to change one word. And that one word is on page 36. where you're talking about the future plans for the marine trades area. So this is not the whole waterfront, it's only the area that has already been designated marine trades. And the language in the current document says properties located adjacent to the ASB, Whatcom Waterway, and I&J Waterway will be reserved for water-oriented uses. And I would ask that be changed to water-dependent. There's a difference. And in the Shoreline Management Act, it calls out sort of three categories: water-dependent, water-related, and water enjoyment. And all of them make up water-oriented. We want to be sure, as the working waterfront, that we preserve that area for actually water-dependent, that it doesn't go to, say, the highest bidder who has a restaurant, which can be water enjoyment, which is legally water-oriented, but it's not water-dependent.
Second paragraph, second sentence.
That language may occur elsewhere, but I noted it on page 36.
That's the second paragraph, second sentence. Correct.
Commissioner, my only caution on that, and Mr. Dyson, would be that our definition of water dependent often differs than the state's. And I would hate to see us restrict ourselves. For instance, the CBC, which is here and represented, are not considered a water dependent use. They would not be allowed to locate in this area if we changed it to water dependent only. They have to fall under the other definitions. So I think by restricting it that much, we are actually maybe eliminating businesses we want to have down in that area.
Yes, but you've been very good at sort of granting exemptions when there's a good reason for them.
Sure.
So I think you would, the boating center would, and it might well be that that would be a discussion, but I think it's better to start with the stronger language. The tissue warehouse, which has never had a bale of anything go in there by water, was granted I think water dependency at that time to make that development. So anyway, this is my comment. You don't have to necessarily adopt it, but at least consider changing the language. The other point is, which I'm very happy to see twice in this comprehensive plan, a mention of constructing visitor moorage along the south side of Whatcom Waterway as this area develops. And I would also love to see that strengthened, because I think the docks is really the prime reason for having a port is getting people in and out of the water, and I think the docks should be put on the plan first and let development develop because there's access to the water, not the other way around. So if anything you can do to put the language in stronger to push that forward. I know it takes a huge amount of plans and permitting and years to get a dock in. You did a great job on the Colony Wharf side. That work could be started now. And then I'll close with my final suggestion I would love to see in the comprehensive plan is somewhere, let's get a customs dock back and make Bellingham a port of entry. It's crazy to be planning this world-class destination, in the middle of one of the best international cruising areas in the world, yet not be a port of entry where people can come in from the Gulf Islands and tie up their boats and all the complications that ensue. Plus, float planes, let's get Kenmore Air back. We used to be a stop, and that would help. So thank you very much. I'm glad to see this document move forward.
Thank you, George. Steve Walker?
Steve Walker, Director of the Community Boating Center, 555 Harris Avenue. And like George, I wanted to address the use of a word in the comprehensive document, and it has to do with the planning, the sub-planning area. In most of the port's planning documents, the Fairhaven district is just referred to as Fairhaven, and even tonight when Sylvia introduced that, she referred to it as Fairhaven, and yet in the scheme it refers to it as the Fairhaven terminal. And I just think that limits thinking about that whole neighborhood. They certainly have the two terminals that are there, the bus train terminal and the cruise terminal are lovely, well-maintained buildings, but there's just so much more going on there in that district, and some of the other sub areas are referred to as districts, and I just think it makes sense. And most of the port's planning documents don't use that language of terminal, but there is a marine trades tendency is growing there. There's an industrial park that abuts the Central Business District, one of the city's most beloved open spaces, Marine Park, is there. The second largest marina on Bellingham Bay, which moors over 200 vessels, is there. And of course, the shipyards are there. And I just think dropping the use of that word terminal in this context makes sense. And I think it may be, to some degree, a reason why the boat launch facility amenities got overlooked in this latest scheme, and I understand some other colleagues have already talked about that, and I would just reiterate that we had, through some generous funding from the Whatcom Parks and Recreation Foundation, the boating center was able to host a community gathering last week where 4 representatives of the port came, and we're very grateful for that. And we talked about the need to improve the hand launch facilities down there in Fairhaven. There are thousands of hand launchings there every year, whereas there's only hundreds of motorboat launchings. And we've got nothing against motorboats, and we're glad that there's amenities for them. We just want the majority user to be recognized as well. And boat launches are they're inherently dangerous. My first job out of college was as a park ranger at a public boat launch, and I witnessed death and crippling injuries as a result of trailer launching that went terribly awry. Most people just simply aren't very good at it. And right now we have, as I say, thousands of people or thousands of launchings every year on that shoreline competing in this traffic-heavy environment. So hopefully the plan can address that, and that language could be modified as well. Thank you.
I have a question, Steve.
Yeah.
I want to be clear on, you want to drop the terminal and Fairhaven District was what you're after, or?
Or just Fairhaven. Some port planning documents just call it Fairhaven, but Fairhaven District would be, I think, inclusive. And
okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Jim, I believe you had something on this also?
Thank you, Commissioners. And I'd like to second both what Steve and George both said. They're members of the Working Waterfront Coalition, of which I happen to be president. And I noticed that they both focused on one word in the document. I wish I could say the same because I'm focusing on a paragraph. So, in fact, I'm going to rewrite a paragraph for you. Of course, you can do what you want with it. But the reason I did that is not necessarily because I want to force you to change the paragraph, but it made it easier for me to explain what my concerns are in the original paragraph. I would like to also comment on process briefly. When you go to the agenda, usually you can call up any of the documents that are going to be discussed at each Port Commission meeting. In this case, that document, for whatever reason, I think it may have been too large, did not appear. I could easily access it once Sylvia explained to me, or sent me a link actually, so that, and I appreciate that, so I could get the document. But I'm wondering, since this does seem to be an important discussion, I hope that other members of the public did not fail to testify because they couldn't find the document because it didn't pop up. So there must be some way to make that happen in the future, since this does seem to be an important opportunity to comment on an important document. Okay, I'm going to deal exclusively with Squalicum Harbor, and you have a handout in front of you that has the paragraph and the rewrite on it, I think. And this discussion is generated by the, I won't say plot, the idea, a good idea actually, to move the fishing gear out of Squalicum Harbor across the street to an area that's still accessible, but clears a large part of the parking lot for other purposes, and also brings on development possibilities that this document speaks to. And before I get into other details, I'd like to point out that one of the reasons to consider moving the gear out of the parking lot was because there is a parking problem, a parking shortage during the larger events. And so it may seem counterproductive to consider certain development ideas that may exacerbate that parking problem when these events take place. So that's just an underlying background situation. So if you can see the handout that you have, Commissioners, with the paragraph that can be found on page 27 under Squalicum Harbor, under the subheading vacant or underutilized land. Paragraph 1 concerns storage yards adjacent to web houses numbers 1 and 2. I'm going to shorten this considerably. It's a long meeting, but concerning paragraph 1 and the rewrite, the storage areas adjacent to those two web houses are used not just for storage, but for working on nets, and that's especially true for Web House 4. And so the point here is that use would need to be relocated to another location, and one possibility would be the Commercial Fisherman's Pavilion, if it was built, that would guarantee space to work on nets. It's unclear to me what kind of development could happen in those two areas. It's hard to picture a building, it being a good building site, but I'm not going to go into detail on that in order to keep things short. Paragraph number 2, and Commissioners, you have the paragraph and the rewrite, so it's a little bit awkward because I can't really explain this very well if I keep it short, but questions later could clarify.
Explain it for us, Jim. Just explain it for us, please.
Paragraph 2 concerns a fenced dry storage area, sometimes inaccurately called the boneyard, that is between Zwanich Park and Harbor Gate 5 to the commercial moorage. On page 25, this area is called a prime location for commercial development or public use. The development option mentioned in the document is for mixed use on the ground floor and residential or offices on the second floor. Given this choice, we think this area should be exclusively and permanently dedicated for public use. Except for the fenced storage area, this whole area is now used exclusively for parking and public use. We oppose any buildings in this area because any construction would irrevocably alter its sense of place and greatly reduce public enjoyment. And I have a long paragraph here which I won't read, but it's about how intensively the public uses this trail that connects the park and Gate 5, and so how many different ways it's used. And continuing to the end, the last paragraph, at any point along this trail, you can see a distant horizon in every direction. We understand why removing the cyclone fence and the gear inside is an attractive idea, but it is not in the interest of the public to replace it with a building that would block sight lines and alter this near-sacred place forever. Development would also hinder large festival events that utilize this area, especially Ski to Sea and now Bellingham Sea Feast. These events attract thousands of visitors to Bellingham and to the waterfront. Bellingham obviously has space elsewhere for mixed-use development, so let's preserve this area for public enjoyment and not sell it off. Those are my comments. I skipped over some things, so if there are questions that are generated by the paragraph and the rewrites, I'd be glad to address those.
First off, if you could get copies of your comments to the commission, we would appreciate it, Jim. Maybe you could give that to Diane and she could make copies for us. I'd appreciate that. Secondly, we're in agreement. I think we need a commercial fisherman's pavilion there to enhance what we've talked about, Sea Feast. I don't know that there's any outlying plans at this time to build buildings along there. There's been some discussions come from the public sector about maybe wanting to do something there. I certainly agree with the fact that's been used by the public for a long time, the sidewalk along there. If something was done there, I certainly wouldn't envision blocking off that walkway along there. That certainly wouldn't be what I would see happening there if there was some, and I certainly would be opposed to anything that would take that walkway away. As far as moving the gear that you speak to, I think we're long overdue to do that. One of the major events that happens in the harbor that requires a lot of parking is just the simple fact that the fishing fleet goes fishing. You've got 5 crew members on a boat. Nobody's got room to park their cars, and we've got trailers full of gear sitting around outside of the storage yard. And a lot of that has come from folks retiring and so on and handed it on to somebody else just because it was something. And we need to do a major cleanup there. The fleet realizes that too. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of pushback. I mean, everybody knows we need to clean the mess up there. That being said, if Commissioner Robbins has something he'd like to add, I fully agree with a lot of your comments for what you spoke to.
Well, I agree the boneyard should be moved sooner the better. That's a valuable piece of property and should be used for something other than a boneyard.
So, and I guess with that being said,
We would be able to retire that word, too, if it was moved. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So I guess
Is there a list of public commenters, and are we through the list?
I have a suggestion. There's nothing essential about this schedule. We do not have to have this adopted on November 1st. We've got a lot of other items on the agenda. I'm wondering if we want to distribute copies of these written comments, maybe even keep the public record open for 2 weeks so that anybody that spoke that wants to send additional email comments, put this on the agenda for November 1 for further discussion, and then adopt it at the following meeting is my recommendation, because we do have several other items to cover yet tonight.
I'm fine with that. I do think we should get through any additional public comments that we
Oh,
have.
yeah, if there's other public comments, yes, I'm sorry.
Are there, oh, please, up to the mic.
Didn't mean to
Sorry
cut
about
you
that,
off.
a little coughing fit I needed to take care of.
Bill McKinnon, and I'll be real brief. I have a one-word, actually it's a two-word edit, but it's a very broad concept. It's called small craft. And the U.S. Coast Guard has informally defined small craft for the past 50 years as anything under 10 meters, 33 feet. In relationship to the Fairhaven Plan, small craft generally means human-powered and small skiffs, crabbing boats that go out that are under 15 feet. And I'd like to see a separation between the powered vessels and the human-powered vessels, because we have stand-up paddleboards, kayaks, outriggers, 6-person outriggers, rowing craft, and they really outnumber the number of powered vessels. But to put into readers' minds that there is a differentiation there, I think would be a good step towards maybe over the next, I might be dead by the time it happens, but maybe over the next 20 or 30 years, start focusing on the human-powered aspect of being out on the water. One example is that when we had the big, the big storm was supposed to come through Saturday, was it? And it didn't materialize. Thursday, we had quite a blow. And I went down to Marine Park because I knew my crazy friends would be out there. And there were 15 people out there in 35-knot winds paddling. They're highly competent, they know what they're doing, but that's the kind of passion for the paddling community we have around here. And we have now, we started out with 1 6-person outrigger canoe. There are now 2 outrigger clubs, 3, 5. We have 5 outrigger canoes. 2 of them are on Bay Street at the foot of Cornwall, and 3 are in the boating center, the community boating center. And the other thing is that the demographics of the boating community, the human-powered boating community, is that we have cardiologists, high school principals, engineers, lots of engineers out there. These are not college students that are going out there. We have 60-year-olds, a couple of them, Duncan Howard, one of them pushing 70, and he is out there when it's really gnarly, and he loves it. And it just speaks to the passion for the activity out in the bay. And Bellingham Bay is unique. I worked with a fellow who was training to swim the English Channel, and he said, I need to come up here because the boating traffic, the power boating traffic, was too much in Lake Washington and right off shoreline, like at Golden Gardens and things like that. So he would drive up here every week for about 2.5 years, and he would swim from here to Lummi and then over to Eliza, and his longest swim was from here to Lummi to Eliza, back to Chuckanut Bay, and then halfway up, he said, "I'm tired, I had it," and he crawled back into my little 9-foot rigid bottom inflatable. Yeah, I had a motor, and but yeah, this is the area that is going to blossom, and it's blossoming now for human-powered enjoyment. I mean, we've got a gorgeous place here, and it's relatively clean.
Thanks, Dale.
You're welcome.
You have a question for, hang on one
Sir,
second.
question. Can you elaborate when you say separating the human-powered
Just,
craft?
you can do a global search through all the documents, and when you say small craft, instead of replace small craft with, or put parentheses after it and say powered vessels, small craft powered vessels, and human-powered.
Okay, so you're talking about separating them verbally, not physically over there.
No, we never separate them.
Okay, very good.
We'd like the Coast Guard to come and rescue us.
No, I was just unsure exactly what you were after there.
Okay.
Anything further from folks that are here? All right, so we are not going to close this. We're going to keep this public hearing open until our next meeting. Was that the proposal, Sylvia, the next meeting?
Yes, thank you. I think that we had enough comments and our time is tight. I would recommend you leave the written record open so that people can send emails between now and the next meeting, and then have a commission discussion of the comments. And I will summarize all of the comments that we've received, at least as I understand them. Once I get the ones from Jim Kyle, I'll summarize those, and then you can go through those at the next meeting.
Okay, so we will postpone any action on this public hearing until our next meeting, and we will keep the record open via email, phone, or any other way you can contact staff at Port of Bellingham or commissioners regarding the scheme.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Diane, if you would. Thank you. So let's move back to our regular agenda now, which, if I can...
Confused.
Public hearing. Public hearings are weird. I'm sorry. I wrote this on a piece. There it is. I knew it was here somewhere. We are going to have a little conversation about Bellingham cold storage. Yeah? And that's, I think, coming from Rob.
Well, it's going to come from Doug Thomas, ultimately, if he wants to come up to the podium. But Doug's going to suggest a use of the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, Warehouse 1, and a portion of the dock space.
Mr. Thomas, thank you.
Thank you, Doug Thomas, Bellingham Cold Storage. What we're looking for is for the commissioners to authorize staff to work with us on formulating a lease for, and right now it's very preliminary. We haven't delineated anything in specific. We've looked at warehouse number 1 and a portion of the dock, but to authorize the staff to work with us on developing a lease document that could come back before this commission that would have in it a provision for a 1-year feasibility study period or a discovery period. It's difficult, I think, to go out and meet with prospective clients and blue sky what ifs. It's yet another thing to have in hand some fairly reasonable certainty around what your overhead costs might be, what your business plan looks like, and what you actually have to offer. Because if we're out looking at or meeting with potential clients and we are not speaking from a known position, we're kind of speaking out of school. We're talking about things we don't currently have control of. We don't know what it's going to wind up being. And you could spend a lot of time working on potential activity that ends up being a non-starter because you really didn't know what you were talking about. You didn't have reasonable certainty about what you're going to be operating with. We have, as you might know, about 70 years of experience of working in the food industry of various types, frozen fresh, dry, packaging supplies for the food-related industries. And that industry segment is continuing to grow, about 12% this last year and 10% the year before that. People are continuing to eat, and people are continuing to eat frozen, chilled, and dry foods. And we, that's really what our proposal is. The proposal would be to have you allow staff to work with that 1 year, work with us on that 1 year feasibility period, which would include then a longer term known period that we could either pull the trigger on or not. We may come to the end of that feasibility study and say, we tried, but it doesn't work. But we kind of need that type of certainty if we're going to go out there and try to identify activity that is meaningful, would be meaningful to the community. And I should mention that the activity we're after, in most cases, reduces significantly the current carbon footprint as it relates to transportation that is currently being experienced by some of the commodities and products that we're looking into. This would be a much better situation for the world if it would come directly into Bellingham rather than being trucked all over the place.
Any questions for Doug, or do you have something further?
So I was just going to finish up by saying that if this is of interest to the commission, we would bring an action memo forward on the November 1st agenda to authorize us to enter into some sort of a due diligence period, and I'd have more details, obviously, on what that specific period is in that action memo. So we're not asking you to vote or take any action tonight, just to tell us whether this is a direction you want us to pursue or not.
Bellingham Cold Storage has been just a great tenant, and while you're a world leader in a lot of even in healthcare, or maybe not world leader, but at least national. And we haven't had much down there in 12 years, as hard as the ILWU has worked to get something and as hard as our staff has worked. And I know as a commissioner giving direction to get something down there, we haven't been able to. And so I certainly would be in favor of entertaining this to move forward.
Thanks, Dan. Bob? Go ahead. Which building, you're talking about a warehouse, and how much land would need to go along with that?
We don't have that nailed down directly just yet, but it would be, we've roughly delineated a portion of the property that would allow Building 2 to have, access and whatnot, but it would go back from the pier, and I don't know the name of that little building there that is kind of a garage-looking building. It's kind of like a web locker-looking building. It would go back behind that some distance, but not too far, and then kind of a rectangular piece that goes up to the pier itself.
Okay.
Adam, that web locker storage, that holds port equipment, is that correct? It's not a tenant?
Rob, that's actually leased to Whatcom Maritime on a short-term lease, but it holds the power transformers that power both warehouse 1 and 2 are located in the corner of that building.
Those are destined to be, is that right, Adam? Those are destined to be changed out or not as part of the undergrounding?
We're putting the infrastructure in place for eventual relocation of that power spine out to that property.
Okay.
Currently, it would exist where it's at, but in the future, it could be placed in the conduits underground.
Well, I'm personally been antsy, especially since the Horizon's no longer making the terminal look like it's being used. So actually having the terminal be used would be lovely. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you're proposing and what we can do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I also would like to see the terminal used, and very interested in what you have to propose, Doug, so I'm in favor of moving forward with it.
I do have a question probably for Adam. Would this change any, while we're working on this feasibility, would it change anything that we're planning to do down there as far as stormwater is concerned? I don't think it would it, that we have on the horizon?
No, it wouldn't. Actually, really to get use out of that terminal, what we need to do is get our stormwater managed and treated so that uses such as this can come in. So no, it's actually, they complement each other for sure.
Okay, so that'll be done either way.
You're correct.
Thank you.
That's it. Oh,
Question, when would you accept public comment on this kind of a concept? What would you foresee?
Can you take the
Well, I
mic?
don't think they want my comments now, probably. But
Sure.
I haven't seen a proposal yet. I'd say let's see a proposal, and then we'll have a conversation.
I think
I've got a ton of questions too, Darren. So.
the process here would be that we get that action memo in the next agenda pack, so it's distributed a week ahead of the next commission meeting. You would have a chance to review it prior to the commission meeting, and then could come comment during the public comment period at that commission meeting.
Does that work? Does that work for you? All right, I'm sure Rob will call you. We'll definitely want to get
We're
that
having
to you.
breakfast on Thursday, I think, so yeah.
Go. All right. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the interest, too. Okay, so let's move on now to our budgets. Let's see, we got a financial report and a budget status with Tamara. Sorry, Brian, you seem to get the last one a lot. Yeah.
You ask a question about this, she's on vacation.
Okay.
All right, thanks. We have open claims for the ports. This actually isn't an open claim anymore. These boat holes were disposed of, I believe, last week. So that's complete finally. The only open claim for the port is that windstorm I spoke to earlier. Open claims against the port, we still have that one. The Alaska Marine Highway System passenger ramp, and the verdict is continued to be appealed there. We've had a variety of large capital projects ongoing this year. The All-American Marine Relocation Project. These are a couple of pictures of us preparing this site for that building. RAM Construction is constructing it, expected to be completed in January. And this will allow All-American Marine to expand and increase jobs. We've done some work on the Blaine bulkhead. This was an emergency repair. It was done with in-house labor, and it has been completed. And this is the bulkhead that's been talked about previously in front of Sound Pacific. We did a large capping project on the GP Pulp and Tissue site, did about 30 acres to the tune of $2.3 million. The C Street Terminal, this is a multi-phase project, and the current phase includes improvements to the C Street Terminal right-of-way. It includes electrical vaults, stormwater vaults, sewer pipes. It's about 30% complete, and we expect it to be done mid-December, this phase of it. As you know, we also did some work on the Blaine Sawtooth. In August, we were able to get some partial access to that sawtooth, and then this week, we're doing some additional work to get the south driveway open to make it easier to tow trailers on and off that pier. The north and south piers in Blaine also had some repairs to the superstructure. We reopened a portion of each of the pier in time for fishing and crabbing season. This is not a huge project, but I wanted to highlight the creative solution that our in-house staff did. These wooden light posts in the inner harbor were rotting, where they sat inside that metal bracket, that silver metal bracket. And instead of replacing the entire light post, which would have been very expensive, we had a in-house maintenance crew actually fabricate these brackets that connected to the bottom bracket and then held that wooden post. So really this will last a very, very long time. And then we also did some work out at the airport. We did some drainage and resurfacing of Area 3, about 3.5 acres. AECOM Engineering and IMCO Construction are the contractors for that project. We're expecting completion in November. We need about 4 or 5 dry days, though, to complete the pavement. So we'll wait for those. And when it's all said and done, we'll be looking at about 3,500 tons of asphalt laid out there. Now for the fun stuff. Let's get into the numbers. So 9 months ago, our net assets looked about... Your joke. Oh, my joke. Thank you, Sylvia. Wait, let me think about this. How was copper wire invented?
Trick question. How was copper wire invented?
Real question. 2 accountants fighting over a penny.
Accountants.
Oh. Okay, now we're engaged. Thanks. Okay, so 227 million net assets is December of 2015. 9 months later, we've got net assets of 230 million. I think I said 1,000 million. So what we look for is an upward trajectory. So this is our 6-quarter net asset trend, obviously upward facing, which is good. And this is where I start skipping around, so please bear with me. I'm combining the quarterly report with our budget report. So I'll start with year-to-date versus budget for the first 9 months of this year. Our operating divisions brought in about $17.8 million in revenues compared to a budget of $18.2 million. Expenses came in about $12.6 to a budget of $14.1. In those same divisions, what we're projecting to end this year is $21.2 million, and then we've budgeted $22.4 million in 2017. So instead of creating a budget versus budget, we project this year and create a budget based on that. We're projecting expenses 14.8 and budgeting next year 14.9, so fairly flat expenses for next year. Digging into it, looking at the aviation division, first 9 months, 4.4 million revenues to a 5.1 budget. We've discussed this already with the airports decreasing revenues. Expenses, we're right at budget at 4.1 million for the year. Looking at the end of the year, we look to come in about 6.2 million, and we're budgeting just over 6.4 for 2017. Looking for a little bit of an increase there. We expect expenses to end up about 5.5 million, and then we're budgeting about the same for 2017.
Tamara, before you leave aviation, what is the, is there any magic on projecting for aviation?
You know, we really just took what we've done through the first 9 months and looked at kind of the average monthly for the past few months and added that in there. Sunil gave a couple of little ideas just to kind of get an idea of where we're at. If it was status quo, where would we be? Mm-hmm. So we're not anticipating any big change. And that's true pretty much for all the divisions. Looking at the marinas, first 9 months, $6 million to a $5.9 million budget for revenues, and this is just seasonal. You know, we get a lot more revenues in the beginning of the year. Expenses, $2 million to a $2.2 million budget. Looking forward, we expect to end the year at 7.3 revenue, and we're budgeting 7.6 for 2017. And we're expecting expenses to be very, very flat in the Marinas division for 2017. Marine terminals, first 9 months, 1.7 to a $1.5 million revenues. And this is because we had only anticipated 6 months of the Horizon lines being here, and they stayed just a bit over that. Expenses are well below budget, under $1 million of a $1.2 million budget. Looking forward, we expect to end the year about $2 million, and then we're budgeting in 2017 of 1.8. And expenses, we're expecting to end the year 1.3 and 1.5 for 2017. Real estate, I think I always call this division the steady Eddie. First 9 months, $4.8 million to a 4.6 budget, and then expenses a little under budget at 1.2. Looking forward, we expect this division to end the year at $6.1 million in revenues, and we're budgeting 6.4 for 2017. Expenses, we're budgeting just a bit higher at 1.8. Overhead, just a reminder, this is planning, admin, executive, and our facilities divisions, our non-revenue producers. We get just very little revenue from fiber leases and things like that. But the first 9 months came in about $2 million expense to a 2.3 budget. And then looking forward, we expect to end the year under $3 million and then just over $3 million budget for 2017. So not adding any big cost there. Looking at our waterfront district, year to date, we brought in $576,000 out of an $800,000 budget. We're aware that's part of that warehouse lease that we lost. Expenses came in at $614 for the first 9 months, with a budget of $800,000. So expenses held below budget as well. Looking at next year, we expect to end the year at $650,000, and we've only budgeted $274,000. As you know, we budget conservatively, so this is not really what we expect, but it's what we can kind of count on. Obviously, we'll be marketing that to come in more. And then we've got expenses budgeted in 2017 of just over $1 million. All other public divisions, this is our economic development, infrastructure, and all our public priorities like meetings, events, commission, records, open space, these types of things. First 9 months, just over $200,000, just under budget. And then expenses well under budget of 1.5 compared to just under $2 million. Looking forward, we're expecting to end the year at $300,000 revenues, and we're budgeting $267,000 next year. And the expenses, we're expecting 2.5 and budgeting 2.6, so fairly status quo for these divisions. So moving on to just the 2017 budget, I want to just remind the Commission of our assumptions for our property tax revenues. In 2016, we're bringing in about $7 million. That calculates to a rate of 0.2764 per thousand value. And a reminder, these are the things that those property taxes pay for: debt, environmental, public priorities, and the waterfront district. Our assumptions for 2017 is that we won't increase the tax base. What this means is if I have a house that is valued at, say, $300,000, and I pay about $82 a year in 2016 for those property taxes to the port, if my assessed value goes up to $350,000, I'll still pay the $82 because my base is staying the same. So I want to be very clear what these assumptions are. We will impose tax on new construction, so if somebody built a new house, we'll levy that property as well. We assume that assessed value will continue to increase as it historically does, and that because we're not increasing the tax base, the rate will remain at least flat or likely decrease. So I'd like to take any discussion there if we have any.
I do have a question. You said not increasing but keeping the rate the same. If the rate's the same and the value goes up, then the amount goes up.
Well, we ask for a certain dollar amount plus the new construction. And then the county tells us about a month later what the assessed value is, and we can do the calculation for the rate. So if we have no increase in the tax base and the assessed value increases, it would have to increase more than the new construction.
In this scenario, Commissioners, it's very likely the rate would decrease, or the millage rate would come down, because the assessed value is going up. We're keeping the absolute dollars we're getting in tax the same, so therefore the rate per thousand would go down. And I would anticipate you're somewhere around the neighborhood of 26 cents per thousand if you do that.
That's assuming that the amount stays the same, and I would ask.
That's right. The other scenario would be that we keep the millage rate the same, or the 27.64 per thousand the same, and then you wouldn't have the base be the same. The base would go up by whatever the assessed value goes up, if that makes sense.
Sometime before we vote on this one, I'd ask Commissioner Robbins and Briscoe to think about keeping the millage rate the same at the .2764 for 2017.
And I think that would result in about 300,000.
Well, we can't ask for a certain millage rate. We can do an estimated guess and do a percentage increase, and I would say either 0.5% or 0.75%. Our max is 1% increase, and see where the numbers end up, but it would have to be an estimated guess.
We have a tax revenue bank capacity, do we not?
Yes.
We do.
And how much is in that?
Lots.
It's an additional probably $2.5 million.
How much?
About an additional $2.5 million the first year.
Okay. And if I understand, if there was something that was really important to use that money for, we can access that money without going to the voters.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So on that one, Commissioners, I mean, when we put out the first budget draft, operating draft, how would you like us to approach this? I mean, there's the two different scenarios, and I think the staff would prefer that we approach it from trying to keep the levy rate or the millage rate of .2764 flat, keeping in mind that we have to anticipate what the assessed value is going to increase in order to do that. So there is a bit of some fumbling going on there with the numbers. We may not hit it exact. That would be our preference. But for the past couple of years, we have had direction from the Commission to keep the absolute dollars the same. Which would you prefer we go at these early drafts of the budget with?
Commissioner Robbins?
I certainly don't mind our revenues going up as values go up. So I would budget in that fashion.
Commissioner Briscoe.
We're definitely short on money for projects for the port. It is Whatcom County's area. I mean, you don't like to see taxes go up. I mean, I certainly understand that, but if values are going up, and I don't know, it's a hard one to call. We're faced with the projects we are to put things back together. Our infrastructure's been pretty much, for loss of words to say, maybe ignored for the last 20 years and pushed forward to this point in time, a lot of it. And we've got a lot of things to do. And I guess you either borrow money or you go to your tax source for money. So it's a uncomfortable place to be to answer that question.
Commissioner, if I could just add, it's not a ton of money, and we're limited by law to increase the levy by 1%. But I think if we increased it by 1%, we would go over that rate. So I believe it would be about a 0.5% to 0.75% increase, and that's only $35,000, $50,000 in the first year. So I understand your concern, but it's not a chunk of money.
So in the previous, what the commission has done previously is chosen the $7 million figure and stuck with however we get to that. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's what we've done in the most recent years, but we have increased the rates. We have increased the levy in years past. So we've done it both ways.
Yeah, I agree with Tamara's math. At a 0.5%, you're dealing with about $35,000. You're going to have another $250 to $300 of new construction. So I think if you did the 1% plus your new construction, you're going to end up with somewhere around $300 to maybe $350,000 in additional tax revenue next year.
Well, I think I'd just as soon stay with our fixed number at this point in time, the 7, and that's the 7 million, correct?
6.9, and then would you take new construction on top of that? Okay.
So we can see the numbers on both of them?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll just run them both ways and distribute them. Again, we're trying to guess as to what the assessed value increase is, so it's not an exact science.
All right, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I just wanted to just quickly remind the Commission of our projected cash flow. So the budget, as you have it, shows this. We expect to begin the year with about $24.1 million. Sources of cash, 46.5. That's all in, absolutely everything. Revenues, taxes, PFCs. Uses of cash, 58.3. Again, all in, debt, capital, environmental cleanups.
Baseball card, trading cards too, that's all?
Yep, it's all in. Projected ending cash, 12.3, and then we'll reserve almost $10 million, leaving us with just 2.5 of available unspent cash at the end of 2017. So Commissioner Briscoe, we heard you 2 weeks ago. You were asking you were asking staff to look at a couple of things. So we did. We looked at adding security at Squalicum Harbor. So the cost for an additional guard each shift, so one for the evening shift, one for the night shift, would add over $96,000 to the Squalicum Harbor operating budget for 2017. We looked at the Fisherman's Pavilion. This is a 12,000 square foot shed, if you will, with one wall. It's just set right on top of the asphalt. There's electric, a small kitchenette, a closet, what I say, electric water service. And that came in at about $1 million. To create a designated storage for commercial fishing gear. This includes just fencing with the slats, I think a couple of large moving gates for vehicle access, and that came in about $57,000. Number one is not in the operating budget as it stands, and numbers 2 and 3 are not in the capital, nor are they listed on the unfunded project. So as we finish today, we'd like to get some direction on what to do with these items. You want to think about it?
I'd like to put actually a placeholder in for all 3 items, is what I would like to do. The security at Squalicum also was I wanted to an updated camera system also included in that, so that's. But I think
I believe there's something in the budget for cameras, and that's why we didn't add it onto here.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Dan's giving us the thumbs up back there.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
about $75,000 for that at Squalicum Harbor.
one of the reasons I'm asking for this to my fellow commissioners is that I had a phone call the other day after the meeting over there. Actually, we've got security issues within our harbor, and I don't believe that one security guard in area that they have to deal with is sufficient at night. We have one of our tenants called me, and I went down and sat and spoke with him, and he relayed his concerns to me. And he's got women working in the evening hours, and they're afraid because they've had issues with homeless people wandering around. We seem to have an increasing influx of that going on, as well as the stealing of equipment and things. We've had vessels stole from the dock that were tied up and ended up in Ferndale up the river. We've got cars that are being stripped inside of a locker. We've got several things going on. It's been going on for a long time, but it seems to be increasing rather rapidly. So I think it's part of the port's responsibility when we lease things or property and have tenants, that when they ask for better security, that we look into doing what we can to provide that. So that's why I'm asking for this in our 2017 budget, that we provide some funding there to do something. As far as the Fisherman's Pavilion, we heard comments on that tonight. I think the 1 million mark has surprised me as well as other people. And I think that that may be able to be scaled down in size to maybe fit better where we're talking about maybe putting it at this time versus the full 200 foot. So I would ask again that we put a placeholder in there for that. The commercial fishing gear new storage area I consider a must. I mean, it's long overdue. Commissioner Robbins and myself have been at MAC meetings. It's one of the topics of discussion. We're spending staff time trying to figure out how to tag items, to figure out who owns them and whether they should be there or not. We've got items outside the storage area that are where we need parking. It's not because we need it for events and other things. We simply need parking to service our marina. We don't have enough parking for the fleet that's there. So this stuff needs to be moved, and I believe there's a lot of derelict stuff sitting there when it comes right down to it. Then when it's time to move it, it'll be reduced. So I would ask my fellow commissioners to agree to putting placeholders in for these things and continue discussions internally with staff to see if we can make that work within our budget 2017.
I'd be in favor of number 3. I agree it's long overdue. The tagging of the gear hasn't seemed to work. It's still a lot of derelict fishing gear around, so I think moving that commercial fishing gear storage area would be good to add to the budget, but I need to know what we're taking out of the budget, because I agree that if we're going to add something, we need to take something out. And I'm not sure at this time what that is. I wouldn't mind staff's recommendation on what they feel if we're going to add $57,000, what $60,000 item we would take out.
So there was a discussion about this storage area for commercial fishing gear, possibly moving further up. I got Rotor in my head. Anyway, further up the street. So
To the Yorkies gravel area?
Yeah.
Is that across the street from the?
yeah, I got to tell you, if I'm a thief, that would benefit me. It's a whole lot easier to cut that lock and steal everything you can and drive away with nobody noticing versus where it is now. Commissioner Briscoe mentioned a car being stripped inside of a locker, and I can see how that could easily be done, even in the middle of the day. So security aside, I don't know. The Fisherman's Pavilion, what does that look like? What do you get for $1 million?
So I have the ROM in front of me. It's 12,000 square foot building, a steel frame building, 10 4x4 skylights, lighting and minor electrical distribution, storage closet with a small kitchenette, task lighting at the memorial wall, water, dry fire suppression system, electrical service, water backflow prevention. And that's engineering and admin and permitting.
So when that concept first came up, I was very much in favor of it, and I still am, but I'm not sure at that scale. What I've had in my mind for a while is a roof and some posts to hold it up, and then if needed, some maybe some fabric walls for certain seasons. So this is a significant departure from that basic concept. So Adam, did you have something you wanted to?
It actually is a very simple metal framed shell, frankly. The programming, honestly, the programming for this building has really moved around significantly. When I mentioned it to this little group that internal group, they were all surprised how small it was. And then when I mentioned it to Director Fix, he was surprised how big it was. So, and then the location has moved. I think there's quite a bit of just conversation that needs to take place to see exactly what we'd really want to build and where we'd want to put it. But that is a simple steel frame, and I can break down the cost right down to the dollar, frankly. It's, but I will say that the cost for that $1 million really come from 2 big sources. First of all, there's a 30% contingency on there for the reasons I just mentioned. We don't know what we're building, where we're building it. So $300,000 of that $1 million is just because we don't know. The other probably $350,000 for that building is the steel frame itself. And that starts, I mean, I can walk right through the cost with that, but yeah, it's a pretty fair building, and it's large, 12,000 square feet. So.
And it has walls, permanent walls?
No, it has a wall on one end where it's thought to host a memorial wall with some task lighting.
And the kitchen concept, what does that look like?
You know, all that is just a little closet at one end, because for sure if that gets built and we want to use it for Sea Feast or meetings and events or some other corporate event types of thing, there's just going to be need for storage for chairs or tables or equipment of some sort. And so it's just a very simple closet at one corner.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a drawing of what we plan to do before we consider putting it in the budget, and where it's going to be located. I mean, a rendering of it and where it's going to be located would really help. This memorial wall is a new addition. I don't even know what the concept of that is. Do you folk?
Yeah, it's a wall on the south end. The wall put up, so you have your prevailing winds through the winter from the south there. So that southern wall being part of the building will give you protection in your building for events or whatever. And you could put a movable curtain on the east side to further facilitate that. But on the inside of that wall, the building side of that wall would be a place for plaques similar to what they've done in, say, Astoria, or Fisherman's Lost at Sea, so on, that type of memorial wall.
Would it be similar to the memorial we have down there now?
It would accent that, yes.
No, I'd really like to see the rendering of it and the exact location before I would entertain putting it into the budget.
All right, moving on.
Okay. Just real quick, would you be in favor of putting it on the unfunded list so that it stays on the radar?
Yeah, let's get it on the unfunded list so we have it in front of us.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Thanks. So really, that's the majority of the presentation. We wanted to get feedback from the commission on if the,
One question I did have before we get off that, on the security guard, don't want to call it a boneyard, the storage area for the fishing gear in the fenced area that isn't used except to store gear. Has stuff been stolen out of that? Has that been a problem? Because it's gated and...
To my knowledge, we haven't had thefts out of that fenced area at Squalicum. And if they have it hasn't been very frequent. I haven't heard from any of the harbor masters that's been any consistent issue.
And with a key, with a code to get into the gates, I'm not sure how homeless people get into those gates when you have a keypad, but I don't think additional security is going to stop the theft. I just don't see where that, I think it's being done by people that can get in there through other sources, and I'm not sure an extra security guard would change much of that.
Well, most of the theft isn't done inside our closed areas. It's done all around the stuff that's outside and off the vessels in the harbor. Now, Dan, we've got one guard, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got one security guard that covers all of our marina, correct?
Right.
Okay. You've got one person covering all these floats, all these boats in the middle of the night, plus covering the businesses and the gear that's under the lockers and vehicles and stuff and boats under the lockers. So you've got one person covering this entire harbor through the whole entire evening. Now, I've noticed a couple guys here in not too long ago, you got people walking around during the day checking out what's all over the place in the harbor. I watched the one kid there for an hour and a half. He's walking around all up and down the lockers looking at everything. So what you got going on is you got guys casing the place. They're lining the stuff up, figuring out where it's at, and then they're coming and stealing it. So and it's been good. I mean,
you're talking from the web locker annexes?
Yeah. Yeah, from that, and actually, we've had several vessels in the last couple of years broken into on the commercial side, and a lot of stuff taken off of them, electronics and so on and so forth. So the problem I see is when you've got one person covering all this area, all they have to do is figure out where that one person is going to be on the other side of the harbor, and they've got plenty of time to deal with taking stuff. Whereas if you had one person in a vehicle covering the grounds, and then your other person is checking your docks and all your stuff, you've got both things covered. I mean, I think it's physically impossible for one security guard to take care of security in a harbor this large at night.
How many do we have in Blaine?
I don't know.
Same.
One in Blaine. Okay. And is there a problem in Blaine, a smaller harbor with one security guard?
Much less of a problem in Blaine
Because of the size, you think?
because of the size, but also the proximity that we have to the urban core here. We just don't have that many transient folks or people in the harbor that we do here.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Does anybody know if there's a fence or a gate between the building on Seaview's leasehold and the LFS building? There's an alleyway in there. Does anybody know if that's gated at all?
Yes,
Did you ask, Mike? I might be able to answer
I
that.
think it
Is
is.
there a gate behind the LFS building?
I think there is.
Oh, between, the
Okay.
roads between Red,
Yeah.
not that I'm aware of, you can drive through there. It's fenced, back of Redden's building is fenced, and then the warehouse is there, but the alleyway through, as far as I know, is not blocked off.
Oh, I thought you meant to get into Seaview.
No,
It's all
between the
fenced.
two buildings
Oh,
there.
okay.
It would seem that you could achieve quite a bit with your one guard by building a gate in that area so that folks can't drive in unseen and reallocating the one guard's time to watching that street. So people walking in can always, regardless of the number of guards, steal something, but they certainly wouldn't be able to drive in. And the assumption being, of course, that the guard is, or the majority of thefts by vehicle are happening at nights. But I don't think we even know that or not, be my guess. All right, all right, you got a question? Your questions?
That was my question. So looking at the 2017 capital budget that the commission has, we have 22.7 million listed in there, offset by 3.2 million in grants. We now have 15.5 million on the unfunded capital, and staff is asking for commission feedback, changes. Do you need clarification? Okay, as is. We need to get this budget's, the draft on the website to the public by next Monday. So we're looking for any big changes that you've got at this time.
So I haven't seen a complete copy. Did I miss an email on this? Because I haven't even seen the budget yet.
I sent you all the documents except for the narrative is not complete yet.
I went through all my email and got nothing, so.
This was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We'll get that redistributed to the commission. I think we'll add those items we just discussed onto the unfunded list. And so unless there's any other direction with the commission, I think we can wrap that up.
What I would like is as these projects come up, all three of these that just came up, I would like to see them on that unfunded list. And I would like the staff to prioritize what the staff feels are that if we were going to do something, what their number one goal would be. You folks are working with it every day. To see where these things from us, so we get input from our.
Are you asking us to prioritize the unfunded list? Because we have prioritized the other lists, so.
Yes,
well,
the
okay.
unfunded list.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's-
not the ones we're doing, that's fine, but the unfunded one.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to know where, it helps if the staff does a little arm wrestling first. And
That could be more than arm wrestling, but yeah, we'll take a shot at it.
Well, I'd like to know where in our director of marinas, where Dan feels the pavilion should go compared to the extra security. Because it's important, you're working with it every day. We're not, so I would like to see that. That would help me.
Okay, we will do that.
Thank you, Cameron.
Anything else? We're good, thank you. And I'll get that to you, Commissioner McCauley.
Nice comparison, nice report, the way you've changed it. That was good.
Oh, thank you. Good. Glad it was helpful.
600ths of a workday is 1/2 of an hour.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Waterfront District update. All right, oh, no, we have Sylvia on this one today.
Put that away.
Put it someplace right where I can find it. Okay, all good.
All right, good afternoon, Commissions. We have a fairly short update today. Some of it you've seen before, and we'll try to go through it fairly quickly. We had a great meeting last time with Harcourt here, and we have a bit of follow-up we'd like your input on today. We provided this schedule last time. This is just a reminder of some of the main milestones that we are still working on. In particular, the cleanup work is continuing. We're going to have a binding site plan approved this fall that will allow us to create parcels for lease or sale. Granary and Laurel Street, the city is continuing to work on, and we expect Phase 1 to be open in January of 17 and Phase 2 to be open in January of 18. The Whatcom Waterway Park is continuing to get developed and is about on the same time frame as the road. And then we're expecting Harcourt to come in by November 19th with their second project. They told us all at the last meeting that their second project will be a residential project along Granary Avenue. And then they had several additional projects that I'll talk about in a minute that will be their third and fourth proposed project. Harcourt, again, they were here last week. They gave a very well-received presentation. I think there was a lot of public enthusiasm for some of their projects, an update on the Granary building, and a discussion of their third project and some future projects. And they also presented to you some ideas they have on the Harcourt Vision Plan. You've seen some earlier drafts before, but this is one of the most recent public discussion of that vision plan that we've had. This is the exact slide that they provided, one of the exact slides that they provided on their vision plan during the October 4 update. And they talked about 4 projects that they wanted to do, 5 actually, in the near future. The Granary building being under construction, the waterfront residential along the waterway, along the Whatcom Waterway and Granary Avenue as being their next project. There are 4 buildings total in that area proposed. They're talking about the first 2 buildings as their next project, which would be 44 residential units with some retail and commercial on the ground floor. They also talked about wanting to put a board mill hotel and a commercial building that they're calling the Gateway Commercial. We actually got an email the other day from another person having a Gateway commercial project, so maybe they'll think of a different name, and retirement village. So those are all projects that they talked about with a fairly lot of enthusiasm and a fairly aggressive time frame. Some of those might take a little longer as we go through. But our question tonight for you, or to really start thinking about, is several of these projects will require an amendment to the sub-area plan. The parks in the Harcourt proposed plan are on a different alignment than the existing sub-area plan. Some of the roads are straight as opposed to angled, and then the board mill is within the Western Crossing area. So this is a little bit of a warped vision. It's stretched a little bit of the existing vision plan. Has the purple in the middle. The board mill sits right in the middle of it. That is Western Crossings. The Harcourt master development area is in the kind of the plaid gray lines, and then the commercial area zoning is in pink. The proposed Harcourt vision would realign some of those areas and would change the location of the parks. It would require relocation of the Western Crossing site, some modifications to the master development agreement. Some of the roads, particularly the arterials that the city is obligated to construct now, most significantly the Commercial Street Green, which is a bridge from the end of Commercial Street angling across the site, would be replaced with a Bay Street entrance with a parking garage. and the parks would be realigned. So those are all things that would need to be decided if we're going to amend the sub-area plan or move forward with the Harcourt vision. And if that is going to be done as a sub-area plan, the deadline for this year is for next year, is April 1, 2017. If we, as a port, as the applicant, were the landowner, working jointly with Harcourt, were to put in an application in April of 2017, it would be approved towards the end or middle of 2018. It takes just over a year to get it approved. So what we did is, while Harcourt was here, we met with city staff, we met with Harcourt, port staff, city staff, and Harcourt are all of the opinion that we could roll up our sleeves and get an application done by April 17th, if that's the commission direction, April 1 of 2017. We'd have to make some fairly quick decisions on some of these things in order to do that. So that's what our question for you is. I distributed copies of this PowerPoint and this slide here showing our actually, Diane has copies of the PowerPoint that are for distribution that I put in the pile. I'm sorry. I thought we were distributing them. Sorry, Diane. So we have copies of the PowerPoint, and the schedule is on the back of it. It's a little easier to read. There are several things that, if we were going to move forward to get a comp plan amendment application by April of 2017, that would need to be done. And most importantly, and I think first, is commission direction on Western Crossing. Is the commission interested or willing to relocate Western Crossing? If so, how would we modify the master development area boundary and the land use map as far as which areas are industrial, which areas are commercial? How do we realign the site? And then we need to look at the location of the roads and parks. Those are all decisions, if we're going to meet the April 1 deadline, that will need to be made close to by the end of this year. If we don't have decisions on all of those issues by about January, then we probably won't be able to meet the April 1 deadline. Once we have a decision on the map, then we need to write all the words, produce all the tables and figures, and at each step have some public input, some commission updates in public so that people can weigh in, and then produce a final plan along with the development regulations, the development agreement, an update to the interlocal for facilities between the port and city, and all of those would need to be done by April. That is all I have for you tonight. It is late. We probably don't have a lot of talk, but we'd like your initial thoughts if you have any on this, or we'd like to schedule this on the next commission meeting so that we can begin discussing, is this something that you're interested in doing this year, or is it something that you need more time on? That is all I have for you tonight.
I would just as soon try to hit the April deadline and move forward with the suggested changes. Get the plan and see what the changes are. I would go forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to slow it. I wouldn't want to have the commission slow this process down.
Commissioner Briscoe.
I would agree with Dan. I don't want to slow the process down, but I certainly want to know what we're doing and discuss it. So I would definitely move forward.
So, Sylvia, what would need to be decided? Let's see, if we move the 6-acre parcel and hold on to 6 acres for some amount for Western Crossing, we would need to decide where that's going to go. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. That is probably the primary discussion or decision that we need input from the commission. We need input from the city staff on some of the road and park alignments and acres and sizes. The main decision I think that we need from the Port Commission is, what do we want to do, or what do you want to do with Western Crossings and the boundary of the Harcourt MDA?
So park changes wouldn't seem to be affected by moving Western Crossing. What
Park
you
changes
anticipate?
wouldn't. The park changes primarily are, as if you can see the large Nike swoosh park, as we call it, it's the Bay Park that Harcourt is proposing is much different than the commercial street green that angles across the middle of the site. So I guess that is a significant change. The arterial road system as it's laid out and the access and circulation through the site is different. So we need input from the commission. Do you like that better? We heard public comments, but we didn't have much opportunity on October 4th to hear from the commission as to what you think.
So the Western Crossing parcel, I'm going to bet that we would not be able to get an answer from Western on that issue by the deadline.
I think we'll have I think we can. I think if we get some direction from their leadership, it may not have officially passed their whatever process they need, but I think we can get a pretty good idea that they're in approval of something or not.
So the engagement of the new president's going to be pretty critical on this, though, because I know he's got a different background than.
Yeah, and I've talked to him and brought him up to speed about the waterfront development. He's toured the site with me a week or two ago, so I think he is, obviously he's not as up to speed as Bruce was, but I think he's getting there pretty quickly. And he's also expressed really a lot of flexibility on where they go. They've got some parameters. They want to be able to see the water from their site, and they don't want any major arterials through their site, and they'd like to border a park. And there's a lot of parameters we have to meet, and as long as we do.
On the list of I want.
As long as we meet those, I think then their concurrence will be pretty easy to get.
Okay, so because I know the commission's process is no more involved than us sitting here right now and making a decision, there are other processes outside of our control that have got to be enabled. When I'm looking at what we see on the screen, Harcourt's vision, there is no 6 acres that would meet.
I think there is. I think we can fit it in there. And what I'd like to do is draw some maps and get them to you all to discuss over the next couple of weeks and see what your thought is. But I think that the 2 buildings that you look into the left of the board mill annex there, what's that street, Sylvia?
Myrtle.
Myrtle.
Myrtle is the way.
If you take those 2 plus the little bit of land that's the water side of that, you may have to cut in the park a little bit. But then I think with maybe 2 acres of the future development area, you could meet the 6 acres they need. I know we came to you back in June. I think we had 3 or more acres in there, and I think we can whittle that down to less than 2 acres now by redesigning that site. Is that correct, Sylvia?
Yes.
But it's going to require flexibility on Western, on your part, and on Harcourt's part, because we may end up going into that Bay Park a little bit as well.
The only concern I've got would be whether or not we could get a cogent request into the city and get Western satisfied and Harcourt satisfied and have all the public meetings we're going to have regarding all of that and still move forward in April. Right. Is there a scaled down version that we could get to the point that Harcourt can move forward without waiting the extra year? I mean, I don't expect you to answer
Well,
right
there
now.
really isn't much of an option for Harcourt to move forward with the board mill where they would like it to be under the current plan. Because
well, let's just take Western Crossing off the board for a minute, and it'll be a play piece over here that will come back into play later. But because I think everybody's agreeing that Western Crossing will still be engaged and with something like 6 acres. But what we need to get into the city so that Harcourt can move forward on the 3 projects outside of the grain rebuilding would be the minimum we have to come up with in April so that they aren't slowed down with an extra year of delay on the changes.
Right, and the biggest issue on that is there's a view corridor that goes from commercial out across the site here.
Is that the commercial street green?
Yeah.
Can
The
we all?
commercial street green is wider, so it goes as a swoop around here.
Can we
more
all
or
agree
less.
that with the new street layout that idea is gone?
We could. That would require a comp plan amendment, though. And so those are all very doable decisions, but it seems like if we're going to amend the plan, the street grid, and the parks, we have to replace the commercial green with some equal amount of park, and we need to, if we're going to move the purple institutional use area that is currently western, we need to decide where to move it to, because all of those things have to fit together into the plan. So there's a lot of, if we keep the proposal changes very simple, limit it to right in the downtown area, I think it's doable to make all these decisions, but the decisions all kind of have to work together. The park, the road layout, the location of the board mill and western crossing all have to fit together, and the area where we run into some constraint is over on the, is in this area over here, because there's only so much space that you can fit with the park, a hotel, a 6-acre western crossing site, and the location of the New Bay Park.
So a bit of a criticism, not to anybody specifically, but the rapidity with which the change to the streets was made to satisfy what we're seeing here has ramifications that are far more significant than just is the engineer designing the right road in the right location.
Right.
This layout satisfies Harcourt. City Council's in agreement with it. Port Commission's in agreement with it. But now we assume then we won't be building Commercial Street Green, but then we need to relocate that parkland elsewhere and then still accommodate Western. So without starting over, the minimum we will need to move forward with the next 3 buildings for the development down there is what we need to have ready to go. Assuming granary looks like this map, and why am I drawing a blank on that street? The one
Laurel.
Laurel. And Laurel looks like this on this map.
Right.
Then the rest was going to have to happen later. Like, where's the new park going to be? Where's Western going to be?
Right.
I don't think we can come to a conclusion by April about those bigger things. I don't know if everybody else thinks I'm wrong, but I just don't see how you get there by April. So my point being, what do we need to do to get in the city council's process to make the changes for Harcourt's next 3 buildings? That would be what we'd have to do.
Well, and I think it's going to be difficult to change the layout of the site without changing the roads and the parks, the whole meal deal. I mean, and right now, the dilemma that we have, the road that is there, Laurel, is an existing road and has an existing railroad crossing. So that's being relocated where it is. In all of the old plans, we had interim Laurel being located there. So the change that you approved and that the city council approved was not a significant departure. It's just a matter that rather than it being interim Laurel, the idea is that it will stay there as permanent Laurel.
Yeah, my point,
But
though,
that does change the whole plan. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, because if you don't have the park space in the middle of Commercial Green, where is it now?
Right.
We don't have that answered, and I think it's
Yeah.
going to take longer than the next few months to get the answer, for example.
Well, it might. If you are willing, we can bring you a few alternatives of how it might look, and you can take a look at them, and then we'll decide. If we can't come up with something that works, then we'll miss the April deadline, and there's another deadline next April in 2018.
So I don't want to get that complicated. It took over 6 years to get to the one that we'd walked away from with the new street layout, where Granary changed completely and Laurel got built differently. So I don't see how we can possibly get something that's out in front of the public and agreed upon by April. So I'm not throwing a roadblock in here. It just seems like that's a big conversation that has got to go through its process.
Right.
In the meantime being, how do we get Harcourt moving without the extra year delay so we can do our process of amending what we need to amend and get everybody on board with this different design?
Yeah, no, Brian will step in. Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. And I think Sylvia laid this out perfectly, and the approach that we're looking for some direction on is whether or not to start those discussions. And what the idea is, we may get to the point where that it does become a little too heavy or too complicated and we can't resolve all these. But I think the direction from the city staff, or the input from the city staff and Harcourt, was, hey, let's see if we can make this work. And the schedule that we outlined is fairly ambitious, but if we do keep it very focused and highlight the really tough decisions, which you've already started to do, can we work through those and get to some resolution that will allow us to submit an application by the 1st. And if not, there are still a number of projects that they can continue working on. I think the 2 first phases of their residential projects that they've proposed are feasible under the existing layout, under the existing plan. And there's a number of projects that they can complete without these changes. But we're starting to move in that direction. I think that staff heard loud and clear from the commission that we were moving too fast on some components without these regular updates and soliciting input and getting these directions. So we're just continuing that process to be transparent and to get that set up so that when we do get to this phase, there's going to be public input, a number of public processes, and if we do make that application deadline by the 1st, then there's the whole Planning Commission public process, which is much more robust. And so that's what we're aiming for, is to engage that and try to hit that. If it doesn't happen, then we'll keep on moving, and we're not really slowing Harcourt down. But I think that we're all acknowledging that we're moving in the direction towards this vision plan, but we're not adopting this vision plan per se. We're just saying we need to highlight where are the problem areas, where is the park on this kind of cartoon maybe not feasible, where is the access point. Now trying to take this and make it as real as possible towards the next step.
Yeah, my request would be just keep it as simple as possible so Harcourt can continue working. And if that means the conference center may be delayed in that process by a year,
right,
it is what it is. But I do believe that their office structure, which is closer to the granary, would fit in here with no significant changes, even with the old plan. And then also, like you said, Brian, that waterfront residential portion would also fit with no significant changes. to the old
Absolutely
plan.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
You don't point out on this that's in front of us where that office building is?
It's the one that they call it Gateway Commercial Building with the arrow pointing to it.
That's their number 2?
No. Their number 2.
I thought that was going into a road
is
thing, you know.
these 2 buildings here are
Right.
their number 2. Those are residential.
That
Okay.
The office building,
Is
this
it
is the
both
one
of
they
those or
talked
just
about,
that one?
100,000 square feet, would be probably a 3rd or 4th project.
Well, I certainly don't mind you redrawing this to go into the park a little bit with Western so that we can move forward. I'd like to see what you come up with. Hopefully, we could approve it and have the city then go forward and approve it, or hopefully you'd be working with the city to give us feedback on where they are on this as well.
Correct.
I think it's important to note, though, the city will have a year and a half of process that they will undertake on this after the April 1st deadline.
Sure.
So I have a question on the Bay Park. I notice that it goes way down into the industrial zone. Is that something they're asking for at this point in time, to move that line down there also, or not?
No, that's something that is in their long-term vision. What we would do is take this, modify it, and then phase it. So right now, we have parks that are phase 3, which is once after there's 1.5 million square foot constructed on the site, then you move into phase 4, and the railroad gets relocated. You move into phase 5. This Bay Park, as it swooshes through the log pond, might be in 25 years. It might be in 10, 15 years. So we can phase it, and each one would have a trigger. If we wait until the railroad relocates, and we could move that park over a little closer to the cogen, there'd be a lot more space in there. So this would be a very long-term plan.
And chances are, over a period of that long a period of time, there will be changes to it again.
Yeah.
So,
That's all from Sylvia?
Yeah, that is it.
Do you have the direction you need, Sylvia?
Yeah, we will put together a few different alternatives maps and share them with you, and then probably put this on. The next meeting is going to be fairly busy. We may not get it back to you until the November 15th meeting, but sometime between now and the end of the year, we need to kind of make a go or no-go decision based on your input. So we'll bring it back to you.
When do you get input from the folks at the city? Or you're getting that all the time, along with Harcourt?
Right. We're continuing to work with the city, but really, as the landowner, the issue of do we or don't we move Western Crossings, and what do we or don't we do with the board mill really rests with the commission as a first step.
You bet.
One more question, Sylvia. The drawing we have in front of us is on a computer screen, the southeast-west line towards the future development area. Is that the current boundary that stands now, or is that already expanded into the log pond area?
That is very close to the current boundary. The current boundary, you can actually see a little better right here, is where not the purple, but the plaid as it goes through the cogen. It goes right about through the middle of the cogen here.
It's not a square piece right now, but pretty much.
That's the center line of Myrtle.
So we're on that line there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so that's...
it's pretty close. It's hard to say because he doesn't have the grid lines on here, so that's why we will produce maps that actually have overlaid on the roads that are there, so that it's a little easier to compare what you have to what we would trade it to.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Sylvia. That is everything off our agenda. Any new business, Commissioner Briscoe?
Was that an evil eye I saw there?
No, not an evil eye. You're going to give me an evil eye.
No, I'm good.
All right, Commissioner Robbins, any new business?
I'm good.
All right, I do have a little bit.
No,
Tamara, I asked you this earlier. TSA, Homeland Security are reliably behind on their payments. Would there be anything, for example, a letter from the commission that asks them to keep current, since it's a set amount and happens every month? That would be lovely for you folks. Is there something we might be able to do that you can think of to keep them up?
No, I actually looked into it this afternoon after we spoke.
Thanks.
And it's not a matter of slow pay. It looks like they've missed maybe an April payment and didn't realize it, and missed a June payment, didn't realize it. So staff is working with them. The airport staff is working with them. Real estate staff is working with them to try to figure out, to help them figure out where they went awry. So we are working on it. We think there's just a couple errors on their end.
All right, so they can't operate from the same as we do, where they have an automatic payment deducted from their checking account every month, I'm guessing?
Their
No?
approval process is a little more rigorous than that.
Okay, all right. Always looking for ways to, help your job so you can focus on important things, not
It's TSA, they got to check and run it
collecting
through
the
the machine
government.
again.
Thank you for that. Let's see, Harbor Security, quick question, Mr. Stahl. So there's some cameras that are going to be going up. How's that setup going to work?
So there's money in the 2017 budget for Squalicum to redo their camera system.
Okay.
To what extent, Dan? Can you enlighten me a little bit on what we're just, a couple of new cameras, or are we going to do pretty good coverage?
I think it'd be good coverage, so we'll kind of start from scratch. We'll talk with the harbor master and staff and see where the areas that they see they want their eyes the most. A lot of what the harbor staff use it for is basically just the operation of the harbor. I mean, you can't see the day dock from the harbor. You can't see Gate 12 at all. And so they use the cameras when visitors call in and say, hey, can I go to a visitor dock? Our folks will go to the cameras and look and see if it's open rather than getting in a car, driving around and seeing. So they use it for operational control. We'll also look at maybe doing some recordings on these, although the cameras that we do have that have recordings have not been terribly effective in helping us prosecute crimes. I mean, we've got a great camera on the south side that looks at the long-term parking lot, and we've had, I think, 3 instances since I've been here where we've got really good footage of somebody with a hoodie and a pry bar walking up to the pay box, reefing the door open, taking the money and leaving, and we share that video footage with the police department, and they're like, You know, unless you get a license plate or a face, not particularly helpful.
You know, that sort of speaks to the point I made about reallocating the staff that we have already on security. So you've got a camera pointed at the box, and you see somebody steal the money, but you never caught them walking a half a block away and getting in a car because the camera's not pointed that way. So I think
That's because the guy was way out of the harbor.
So I wonder if a really good hard look at not just where the cameras are pointed, but if we need a different kind of camera.
Correct.
It pointed in a bunch of different places. It sounds a little silly to say it, but I'm going to say it. Game cameras are really effective, and they can be moved easily, and randomly. And, I think, I don't know how useful they will be in a situation like this, but clearly something different has to be looked at rather than what we have been doing.
Correct. We don't look to just replicate the old system that we have with new technology.
Yeah.
We'll take a fresh look. IT has said that they'll be part of that team, so that should be a good project.
Cool, thank you for that. Train crossings came up today. We have 3. One of them was a private, quote, private crossing. Is there, Sylvia, question. Is there something about the private crossing that we can do faster because it is a private crossing?
It's not really a private crossing, Sylvia Goodwin.
It's not public,
It is
though,
the behind Seaview, it's where behind FMIP where it crosses over. And that one is actually, I think, only $30,000 or so. They're all expensive, but that one is pretty small and would be less expensive than the others. We are in the unfunded on the budget, you have 1.2 million that would cover the 3 crossings. The big one being on Harris Avenue because it's the main drag and the entrance to the cruise terminal, and the other one is being over by the boat launch, which is a little smaller. But the private one, really the only people that use it are when they're taking boats across that crossing. But because it's a crossing, the trains have to blow their horns there, and the only way those folks know before hauling a boat across that rail is they go out, look both ways, and listen for the train to blow the horn because they don't have any other way of knowing a train that's there. So that, some type of a light system that would light up when there's a train on the track a certain distance apart, would then let the boat repair folks know how much time do you have to get your boat across before a train hits it. So that might be something that we could electronically do. So you could divide those into 3 sections and do something less expensive.
Are they broken out individually in the budget?
No.
Or it's just a one-line item for 3?
But we have some cost estimates in a study that the city did that I can get them itemized if you want those numbers.
All right, I might suggest that we take a look at, I'll bring it up later, but we take a look at least doing that one since it is a somewhat affordable thing to do. And then we don't have to try so hard for the extra million or $1 million plus. So
Exactly. I'll get the breakdown and get it to Tamara for the budget.
Thank you for that. Brian Gowen, the Squalicum Beach fixes over there, so a lot of concrete's coming off. How far around the peninsula behind the plant does that go?
Actually, that might be an.
Is that an Adam question?
Is that the storm damage?
No. It's the reconstruction of the beach, and there's supposed to be a groin put in out there and a bunch of new sand and all that.
Oh, is that the Mount Baker?
Yep.
Mike Hogan might actually be the sponsor on that one. The Squalicum Beach Habitat Project.
Quick and easy answer. I was just wondering how far around that peninsula that the work is going to extend.
Commissioners, evening. Michael Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Yes, we have several habitat projects over in the Squalicum, Mount Baker Plywood Peninsula area. One is on the Squalicum Beach area, and that's to remove some of the failing riprap and install a beach. We have completed the 100% engineering design, and it's just kind of grant funding eligible. We've had success getting grant funding through the Bellingham Bay Pilot team, but currently we don't have any grant dollars allocated for that project. And then similarly, we have a habitat restoration project we're working on kind of between Roeder Avenue and the BNSF rail spur. There's concrete over a city sewer line, and basically the creek kind of turns into a concrete channel. It's a fish passage barrier. similar situation. We're at about a 30% design level. We don't have funding to complete the project. It requires a lot of partnerships. The city, kind of on their radar, has replacing the sewer main that runs under that stream. And so we've looked at that as a potential opportunity to try to implement that project, but nothing on the radar right now.
So back to the other side of the peninsula, the riprap is all concrete now, and it extends quite a ways out on the peninsula. Does it go clear to the corner where it turns and kind of squares off the corner?
Yeah, it was, you're talking about on the north side of the Mount Baker Plywood Peninsula? Yeah, it's like it was an old bridge or something from the 1950s that they put on for shoreline protection, and there's kind of rebar sticking out of it and whatnot, but it does extend all the way out to the end of the peninsula.
So is that how far that project, the first project you mentioned, is going to go?
No, the first project goes up from about, you know where the propane tank is, the Mount Baker Plywood propane? It goes from about the propane tank into the existing beach area.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. We have, I think, district heats has come up. Is this in our unfunded or funded 2017?
We have district heat as being funded, but I think it's quite a bit higher number than we need, so there might be some monies available from that to use for other projects. We'll know more in the next 2 weeks on that.
Okay, and we have told the city, yes, we want to move forward with the district heat proposal.
Well, we met with the city, the port, and Harcourt met on this, along with a gentleman from Oregon who we brought up in advisory capacity, and we're waiting on a report from him before we figure out what the next steps are, but everyone's trying to make it work in a cooperative manner, yeah.
But it isn't a budget, so I don't have to.
I believe so, yes, yes.
The quiet zone came up. Squalicum. That's it. I'm good. All right. Anything further?
I think you set a record here, Commissioner McCollum.
No, I can go.
Time, 4 hours?
Oh, I can go another hour or two, but
Can you?
nobody wanted to go home, so they did. Anything from you, Rob? No? Senior staff? Anybody? All right, with that, we are closed. Thank you, everybody.